I just dragged him. What's up, Rob?
Not much. Thanks for having me. Let me
Just,
get my camera on.
Yeah. I have a question. I want to know if this happened to you because I can't find fucking anything on this. When you started sitting around the 30 to 50 viewer mark, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have this issue where every single solitary fucking time you get between 40 to 44 viewers, you lose 12 viewers instantly in drops? And if you sit at 39 viewers and you get rated, you actually go to like 27 viewers, despite you being at like 50 some viewers?
I can't say those specific numbers, but what I can tell you that was similar to that, and I still notice it is, I will be streaming and it'll say like 83 people watching, 83 people watching, and then all of a sudden it'll say like 62. And I'm just like, that's weird. That many people left at once. And then like 5 minutes later, it's back up to 83. And my guess is no one left. I don't know if maybe it's because people are seeing ads and it takes that number away temporarily. But I can't say specifically around the 40 number. I don't know. I know this, that I have people all the time telling me I never get notifications when you're on.
Oh yeah, we get like I think it's like an average of like 4 people click a notification out of our 1,700. It's like, come on.
It's nuts.
Yeah, but no, like it's just a thing that we have. We know the exact numbers where it always happens, right? So it starts at 30 and then eventually break out at 30. And then it starts at 36 is the other magic number. And then it's 40 to 44. It'll usually be either 40 or 42, sometimes 44 for the night. And then if we can break past that, despite us losing a third of our audience, every, let's say 15 minutes, a third of our audience just drops and is gone. Then if we can get past that, we can then get into the 40s. And it's been happening like every single show for like the past 3 weeks where like the entire, and then sometimes randomly right around the 2 hour mark, it'll just stop happening. It'll no longer happen. And those jumps will no longer happen. And I thought it's like a bandwidth issue or something on Twitch's end, and Twitch support like is just ignoring our emails and tweets.
Of course.
Because we're not a partner.
Like, that's right. I mean, it's so, what I find to be so amazing, like people like us that plug away and do what we're doing, like first off, your audience and my audience is going to be worth an audience of 500-600 people because they actually engage and they know people like us are willing to say things that maybe they'll disagree with. So there's a lot of people that have these sort of inflated audience, not just with bots and stuff, which is certainly, that's the left wingers.
With lurkers, Yeah. Soft giving came to us, right? And they were like, out of everybody in Twitch politics that we were looking at, because we wanted to see if we want to start talking to people in politics, your terms of like active chatters to viewers was the highest that we found. So we reached out to you because you guys have, and like, I didn't have the heart to tell her like, I might just have more viewers and they keep disappearing from the fucking thing. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, but it's like, I think I have like, when I look at it, like I'll have portions where I'm sitting at like 32 viewers and like, you know how you can now look at like how many active messages you have in a 5-minute window? I'll have 72 active messages in a 5-minute window with no bots or spam. With 30 viewers, it's like that's 80% are supposed to be lurkers. Like, come on.
I don't care. I'll talk trash on people. I don't care. And I'm not blaming them, but like you watch something like when you would be on like Hippy Dippy panel or something, there'd be like 900 people watching. I'm sorry. I won't be convinced that a lot of those aren't bots. You know, and I'm not saying that it was intentional on the part of the people running the show. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I myself have been botted where my numbers shoot up. And I don't know if you have, I have Stream Elements, so
I've gotten follow bots, but like I have 500 or roughly like 400 of our followers are not real followers. We don't have 1.7, we have 1.3. We sent it to Twitch and was like, hey, these are bots, like get rid of them. But but if you look on Twitch Tracker, that's true of like everyone in Twitch politics.
Yep.
Like Sansol is worse. Sansol I think has like 13,000 bots. And like the overwhelming majority of his followers are bots. And like,
yeah, I mean,
you know,
and I don't know. And again, I'm not blaming Son. I don't know. I think that a lot of times with stuff like that, I think that it's like, maybe we'll talk about this some today. When I talk about corruption from our institutions, literally believe that like Barack Obama was sitting with Lois Lerner drinking blood out of his skull. Like, yes, let's target conservatives with the IRS. they have this culture where they believe they're morally superior. So it's
Hmm.
unsaid. It's just like, well, we're justified in doing this because we're good people and they're bad people. And I think
Hmm.
that even in the Twitch sphere, in our little area of the world, you see the same thing where, I don't think when, all the times I've been doxxed and my employer's been called about me, and
Oof.
I had the worst thing I had happen was I had someone follow me and it popped up on the screen, so and so's following you. It was literally my password for Twitch. And it's got a bunch of characters. It's not like my password's Rob Noerr. It's like a weird set of
Hmm.
numbers and stuff. And it said that it followed me. And then my phone rang and I answered the phone live because it showed up as a number like local. And it was someone calling, like, giving me shit that was watching me live. So I don't blame the people I'm streaming. So like when I think that it's just the culture of the people that watch those people.
I think
So
George
I don't know.
Carlin. I think George Carlin said it best when he said, "You don't need a conspiracy if like interests align. Like if they all have
Right.
the
That's
same
exactly right.
interests, then there's no need for a conspiracy. Like when people are like, "Oh, you think the Rothschilds are, having dinner with Hillary Clinton at a spirit cooking ritual to like fuck over the farmers?" It's like, no. They just have the same interests. Large corporations that work for green energy companies want fucking government handouts, and those government people want money from them to get reelected. And so they march forward in progress with solar power, which is trash and bad for the environment, instead of nuclear, which would be fucking great. If we all just built fucking nuclear plants, we could just give up on this whole fucking global warming thing. Like we
Yeah,
could,
they know it.
you know what I mean?
Know
Like,
yeah, yeah, they know it. I was actually just on I was talking to Counterpoint, mentioned Counterpoints on Twitter. I did policy debate in college. One of the topics one year was we should sign one of the following 7 treaties. One of the treaties was the Kyoto Protocol.
okay.
And I don't remember the specifics, but for those listening that might not know, the Kyoto Protocol, it was a lot like the Paris Climate Accord.
Yeah, it was basically the precursor to the Paris Accord. Yeah.
Right. And so I believe at least the evidence that people were reading while I was debating this in like 2004 or so said that we needed to pledge to reduce our 2020 emissions by 20% by 2020. That was, if we did
Something like
that, we would
yeah.
stave off the worst, right? And we met that. We did. Without signing the Kyoto Protocol, we lowered emissions of the type they were talking about around 20% within 20 years. And no one said, "Well, thank God we did it." Because what they'll always, it's a grift, right? That's what it is. My favorite story about this is I was on Dylan's panel once, and Mike from PA and Vosh were on the panel, which what a crew that is, right? And I didn't know either of them really. And they kept saying, "There's a consensus, there's a consensus, there's a consensus." I said, "Well, what's the consensus?" I'll concede that there's a consensus that there's climate change, and there's a consensus humans have something to do with it. But that's it. That's the end of the consensus.
Right.
Right. And the important part is, how bad will it get? How much do humans contribute? What can we do? Those are the important parts. And there is
also, for the record, that consensus was created by a New York Times journalist or Washington Post. I can't remember anymore. So we'll just say one of the major media journalists.
Right.
And he basically concocted a totally bullshit study that said 97% of climatologists agreed. And like when they were like contacted, they were like, "No, I never fucking said that. Like, that's not what I think." Like there's a good like 4% of climatologists that are under the agreement that more CO2 is good because it'll increase plant life and increase food production, and that like it'll change weather patterns. But like if people move and people deal with those things, that'll actually be good for like population and human growth. Like more than which is like 4%, I might say that those guys are kind of wacko, but like the 97% consensus was like totally made up.
Well, right. And I looked into this before, and it was odd how, because like you said, some of the scientists that they were including in that consensus were like, no, that's not what I said. It was one of those deals where they were like polled, or they were asked a question that was like worded in a very vague way, and it was something that almost everyone would agree with. Like, sure, the climate's changing, and then
yeah, it was like that. It was like, is the
consensus.
climate changing from year to year or something? Was the question, and it's like, well, if it wasn't, then there wouldn't be a need for climatologists. You know what I mean? Like if the climate was always the same, then there wouldn't be a need for my profession. Obviously, I agree. Like what that means in terms of like global warming and stuff like that. I think the biggest, I don't know, shit is getting wild these days. Like especially with the way they're treating nitrogen in the Netherlands and in Canada. Like they're going to starve millions of people to death if they get their way.
That's the point. I want to talk about that, but I'll just say this real quick. Anyways, when I asked them, I said, all right, Mike and Vosh, there's a consensus. So how much do we need to reduce emissions and by what time? And they just looked at me slack-jawed. I'm like, well, there's a consensus, right? I mean, this is your big singular issue. So surely you know the data on this. So what's the consensus?
Right.
And so they're furiously Googling. They're like, you know, and you know what? You know what Vosh answered me? You know what he said we needed to do?
What?
As much as possible. Which is another way of saying the problem will never be solved and we'll always continue to use this as an excuse for our globalist communist agenda. That's right. What he said.
Well, what he's really saying, and this is the problem that I have with most conservatives, and I don't think you necessarily fall into this, right? But in most online space conservatives is that they think they can fight the enemy without understanding the enemy's philosophy. And right. Or they think they understand it and they just call it commie. But they don't understand the dialectic. They don't understand that the way the Marxist materialist dialectic that moved into critical theory works, right, and is the same thing that's used for critical race theory, gender ideology. It's the same basic mode of thinking of the average leftist. Is there's a problem. The problem will actually never go away. And the reason it will never go away is that there is an institution of like liberal democracy or like people that are wrong, et cetera, right? So this problem will always be here. And so also the world is full of contradictions. There is no such thing as an objective one truth. And so what we must do is we must analyze the contradictions using historical analysis and empirical evidence to then, and equity and things like that, and blow that out of proportion so that we can gain an emotional argument to then restructure the contradictions in a power dynamic that better fits our eventual goal of destroying said thing. And so once you understand that, you understand, oh, what is critical race theory? It's that. White supremacy is the problem. White supremacy will never go away so long as we have, liberal democracies and we don't have the communist utopia. Therefore, find an element of society that is supposedly a contradiction, assume historical analysis and standpoint epistemology and bad data, reorganize the power structure, and boom. And it's the same thing with capitalism. It's the same thing with gender ideology, which is just heteronormativity. It's the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, it comes from like postmodernist theory, right? And that's the central. I mean, I can't consider myself an expert scholar, but I used to deal with this in debate all the time. Mm-hmm. In policy debate, you would have policy objections to a plan. So let's say your plan was we should reduce corn subsidies by 20%.
Right, and then you're given a philosophical analysis by which you're supposed to judge the rightness or wrongness of the policy.
Right. So normally what you do is say, well, here's the hypothetical situations that would happen if there would be a disadvantage. So if we reduce corn subsidies, it would cause more starvation in Africa, something like that. Well, you could have a philosophical objection to the plan. They called those critiques, right? So a critique might be a critique of capitalism. They would say your plan is involved in the capitalist mindset, which furthers capitalism, and our alternative is to reject capitalism. And you'd be like, well, what does that do with the specific, scenario we're talking about in real life? Like, when you say reject capitalism, what do we replace it with? It doesn't matter. We just rethink. We have to criticize and this all comes from postmodernism, where it's an inherent contradiction.
It's not
right?
that. It's real quick. It's not that. It's class consciousness. Right? The inherent Marxist opinion, and it's the same thing with critical pedagogy and like Paulo Freire in our education system, right? Is, race consciousness, class consciousness, gender consciousness, whatever. The idea is that the system that is oppressing us doesn't actually exist in terms of material reality, but is instead a mythology held up by those with power. So capitalism is a mythology, and the capitalist class uphold it as a means of using real world power to oppress people. And so if we raise enough class consciousness, then the mythology breaks apart because enough of us believe the revolution comes. We get rid of the reactionaries that can never be made believers. And then the mythology that has been oppressing us is over. So that's the actual answer. We just need to educate more. And then,
The authors they would use were postmodernists. So they would use Foucault, they would use Heidegger, they would use Spanos, right? And what they would the reason that that's an inherent contradiction is because the big focus would be on the idea that there is no objective truth, like you were saying, right? So there's no objective truth, therefore there is no they would believe this, that us three right now having this conversation, we're not having a conversation to get to the truth because the truth doesn't exist. The truth is
we're representations of our identities.
Right. And so the only utility of this conversation is a power struggle between us. That's it. That's the only utility. So we're not actually trying to make the world better. We each have our subjective reality, and we're engaged in a power struggle to get that subjective reality and what we want done about it perceived by
and they're right
out there.
They're right. And I'm doing this I'm doing this only to steal all of Rob Noerr's viewers to my channel, because I am the superior channel and I don't actually care what his opinions are, and I don't want to be his friend. Kidding.
Where's your flag? You'll never get them without a flag, damn it. But no, just to finish. And so they would be like, there's no objective truth, therefore communism. But it's like, but that's saying communism is a manifestation of the idea that there is an objective truth, at least state power. Like having to, well, let me finish, right? So like the idea that they would say there is no objective truth, right? So they would isolate the problem saying there's no objective truth. Foucault, for example, he did what was called genealogy. So he would go back and he would look at history through the loser's eyes. So he would say, let's look at history through people that have been deemed to have mental illness. And then he would write this history out and say, see, we used to say gay people had mental illness and this is what was treated to them. And so and then he would say, therefore there is no objective truth, there is subjective truth, because your truth would have been different if you were gay, right? But then to say that and say therefore communism, but that's an objective answer, that this is an objective thing that could solve the problem, which is an inherent contradiction. It just is. And so even at that level, and then even beyond that in debate, which this isn't going to matter to you, but debate, you're basically trying to win, right? That's the whole idea, right? Could you ask for a ballot? Because the ballot's basically an endorsement that they feel that you did better, but there's no objective truth. Right. And so like it was so confusing, like the sort of things that people would say like this. But basically, from what I get from it, the most important thing is to understand they don't believe in objective truth. They believe it's all subjective in a power struggle. And then it all makes sense. Right. And so when Vosh says we should do as much as possible, what he's admitting to there is, even if we reduced emissions by 90% next year, they'll still say, well, that wasn't as much as possible. You still need to give me and people like me power over you. That's the end goal, that they think that their subjective reality is most important and they should have total control over you. That's what they believe. And that's why they'll always answer like these ambiguous, vague terms where they'll be like, oh, we need to do as much as possible. They won't say, hey, if we reduce emissions by this much by this time, that would solve all the problems. They'll never say that.
So I want to disagree just slightly. Like, I think you're mostly right. But what I would say is that Marxism is Hegelian, and that it doesn't necessarily believe in objective truth. What it does is it makes moral prescriptions, right? It makes moral prescriptions about material reality, but it doesn't actually state that the objective truth is inherent in that material reality or even within their own moral system. And so I think the dialectic is so inherently subversive that the majority of Marxists don't even understand Marxism. Right? Like, you have the intelligentsia, like the hardcore academics that get it, but then you have like the vanguard and like the useful idiots, and the vanguard of like these activists that have read Marx and shit. Like, they don't actually understand the philosophical grounding. So I would say that they might believe that there's objective truth to some degree in the claims of Marxism, but what they're really engaging in is the means by which engaging with material reality, because that's how they engage with those things. But they still maintain that contradictions of truth are not only acceptable, but necessary part of reality, and therefore that there is no objective truth, because Marxist materialist dialectics come from Hegelian dialectics.
Well, and look, I'm not going to claim to be a scholar of Marx or
me neither. I've read some, but
yeah, I've read a little. But to me, the simplest way to think of this is, it doesn't matter if you could prove the contradiction to them, because they don't believe,
because they don't care. Anyway. Right.
So if everything's a power struggle, and that's how I talk about this a lot. My audience is probably tired of it. I'll see if either. By the way, you don't mind if I call you Scott? I haven't met your co-host here.
Mark, why don't you introduce yourself, Mark?
I'm Mark.
Nice to meet you, Mark.
Mark is my
Thanks so
shadow.
much. It's great.
Mark is my shadow Hokage. Like, he doesn't talk much, but it's like he's got tendrils in the Discord and in the chat. And it's like, this show could not be possible without Mark. And then there's just the occasional fucking with me and trolling with me serial killer or cult reference that comes up. And every now and then Mark really has something important to say, and everyone shuts up and listens because he won't talk for like 2 hours. And then you'll be like, that's a good fucking point. It's fun. It's a fun dynamic.
I need a co-host like that because I talk a mile a minute. So
yes,
like me and you wouldn't be good co-hosts together because we're both big talkers. You need someone. You need the dichotomy. That's good. But you know, when it comes to sort of like this thing that I understand, a real world situation that happened recently. I understand. You remember the Netflix protest where Dave Chappelle was on Netflix and a bunch of trans people at Netflix were pissed? Right. So there was this guy, I think his name was Vito.
Yeah, Vito. He's on our server. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I've DM'd him a couple times. I'm trying to get him to come on the show with us, and he keeps being like, "Yeah, I'll come," and then just like doesn't talk to me for 2 weeks, and then I'm like, "Hey."
Oh, well, let me know if he comes on. I would love to watch. I would love to talk to him myself because I use him all the time as an example. So he shows up. For those that didn't see it, he shows up at the people were protesting.
Sign, yeah.
People were protesting at Netflix because Dave Chappelle made a trans joke. So the employees of Netflix are protesting outside the building. And Vito shows up holding a sign. And the sign didn't even have anything to do with trans issues. It basically, if I remember, just said like Dave Chappelle's funny. That was his whole point. He's like, I think Chappelle's funny. This is stupid. He's funny. And he's just joking around. Now, this sign was on a broomstick or something like that. And so what happens is that he gets surrounded. And at one point, they rip the broomstick like out of his hand and rip the sign off. And this is all on video. And when they rip the sign off, immediately someone yells, he's got a weapon, right? Because now it looks like he just has a club, right? But it's really a
they
sign.
accuse him of having a weapon after they attacked him and made his sign into a weapon.
Right. And so he says, why are you doing this? And some woman says, because you're awful. If you understand that, you understand everything that's going on. Why can they engage? Why could they riot over and over, but then get upset if you just use words? Because you're awful. Why is it? And this all goes back to, right, I remember when The Guardian wrote this big write-up when Richard Spencer, I have no love for Richard Spencer, but when it was, is it okay to punch a Nazi? And it's like, the answer is no. Because if your answer is yes, I mean, in certain circumstances, it could be if they're physically attacking you, then sure. But just because you don't like their ideology, the answer is no. Because as soon as you say, well, okay, I guess, what's the very next thing out of their mouth? Well, everyone I disagree with is a Nazi. So now I've justified. And it's not, if they justify violence, then of course they're going to justify double standards. They're going to justify being disingenuous. But it doesn't matter anyways because there's no such thing as truth. All it is a power struggle, so they, in their heads, could justify doing any evil to you because they know you're an evil person. Now, people like me and you would say, well, how do you judge who's good or evil? By your actions, right? But not to them. They say that, no, we make a prejudgment that say subjectively, I'm good and you're bad. Therefore, the action is justified. And that's how I see all of this. So I'm based ANCAP, right? Hardcore libertarian. So like I wouldn't care about whether or not someone is evil. I don't care. What I care is, are they a criminal? And I would use that under the pretense of natural law philosophy, which is, have they committed an act of aggression upon another person? Have they intentionally harmed another person, engaged in some attempted harm, just damaged their property in some way, or their persons, right? Or their, and if they have, then I demand restitution until the problem is resolved. And if not, I don't really give a fuck what you do. I don't give a fuck whether or not you can be an evil person. You can, like I said, like I don't care, right? If you go into your apartment and you take a knife and you cut an upside down cross on your skin and you just have a fucking orgy with a bunch of furries and pray to Moloch that the world be destroyed. Why? Because nothing's gonna fucking happen except your dumbass might get HIV or monkeypox or some dumb shit because you fucking cut your wounds open and had an orgy. I don't care what you fucking do. That is evil though, right? Like I think most people that have some concept of like good and evil in their gut, they're like someone in their apartment cutting a fucking upside down cross, like fucking over in a spirit cooking ritual, praying that the world be destroyed, might be considered evil by quite a few people, but I don't care. Because they did to themselves without any harm or acts of aggression on other people. So like, I might make my personal moral judgments there, but like I have an objective standard by which I view
aggression, by which I view what is a morally justifiable claim. It is not morally justified to, for example, support the state, or to support taxation, or to support violence, or to support punching a Nazi because they disagree with you. And to argue against it is a performative contradiction as an individual, as a self-owner, as someone that is arguing. But in terms of what moral claims I make, I don't fucking know.
Right. So I don't agree with you as far as being a total ANCAP. I think there's role for a limited state, but in principle, I agree with sort of the ideology you're going. In fact, I'll go a step further, even though I think the state should exist, right? Like, so what I'm saying, like you're saying, the person that's a Satanist, that's my neighbor. My choice is, I think you're evil, I won't hang out with you. But that doesn't give me the right to use violent force against you.
Right.
And that then intuits that doesn't give me the right to want the state to use force against you.
Right.
Like, that's outrageous. You should be allowed to do that. I'll just say, I don't want to hang out with you. But the problem is, no matter how heinous you are, I can't physically attack you. As long as you're consenting adults. Now, there becomes questions. If a state exists, right, and we live in this world where a state exists, then do we need to say, well, we need to preemptively keep people like that from using the state to enforce their beliefs on others, which is what I think is going on with CRT, which is what's going on with the sexuality of children. If
I think
the
that's
state's going to exist and be
right.
involved in education, we have a duty to say, no, we must stop these evil people trying to indoctrinate our
I have no problem with using state violence as a means of self-defense for other violent actors, right? And so I think this really goes well into talking about McCarthy tonight, right? Because, McCarthy in his entire story is one basically of ousting communist spies paid by Moscow, provably so, as a means of subverting our government and trying to, without what we're going to go into tonight, if those spies hadn't been there, it's almost a probabilistic reality that China and North Korea never would have fallen to communism. Those spies had infiltrated the State Department and the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, the number 2 person at the State Department. Dexter White was in charge of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the Bretton Woods Initiative. I mean, without that massive amount of stuff, and we'll get into it tonight, China, we would have. It is very likely that the nationalists would have won against the communists in China, and that you would have had a liberal democracy in China without having the communists take over or the Great Leap Forward. Well, I mean, you might add aspects of it, but yeah, I mean, so it's, is it justified then to use the state to defend against foreign actors attempting to destroy and harm other people, especially those that are Americans or others? And I would say yes. And I would say the same thing about, let's say critical race theory in schools. I think that, they're justified band-aids. I think the real problem is public education in general, the fact that the government's involved in it. And I think the second major problem is the fact that we're targeting schools looking for CRT. Meanwhile, conservatives are so fucking far behind that they don't even know what transformative social emotional learning is. And they're creating new words and new ways to do it anyways, because critical pedagogy has completely infiltrated the profession of teaching in the academics. And so even if we had school choice and even if we banned CRT, the colleges are still churning out fucking woke activists left and right as the only people that you can hire to be a fucking teacher.
Right, and it's kind of goes back to something we were saying earlier. Like, people really need to listen, look into Christopher Rufo, or even more importantly, James Lindsay, that talks about social emotional learning. And I can never pronounce his name right. Pablo Freire, is that his name?
Paulo Freire.
Paulo Freire.
Yes.
And sort of the methodology, it's not about education, it's about creating activists. Right. And they'll admit this. If you read even the founders of CRT, they talk about this all the time, that when it was moving, I forget the name. I read Bell and
Bell Hooks.
I don't know. Not Bell Hooks. I know her. I forget the two that are always
Stefanik and Delgado. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's it. Stefanik and Delgado. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you read the beginning of their one paper, they talk about the ideas to create activists in these schools. I debated what's his name on this? Jangles. I don't know if you've ever talked to Jangles. What a sad
I was on him one time with it was kind of funny. I was on a hippy dippy with him once, kind of early on. And Haz and I were the only ones on the entire panel that were being reasonable. When you're agreeing with Haz, because we're the only people that were able to correctly identify the problem and talk about it.
Communist. Yeah.
It's because everyone else was just like dumb talking points that were like not dealing with like the issue. And so Haz and I obviously had wildly different prescriptions, but like we were the only ones like just actually having a conversation at that at that level. And I was like, Jangles was just like getting super triggered saying dumb shit. And I was like, this guy's supposed to be this big science bro, but it's like talking to a fucking it's like, honestly, I've heard better arguments from my 15-year-old sister who's just now discovering like politics and shit from her. I've heard much better arguments from her.
Well, and I'll get meta here for a second. This is sort of off topic, but when I'm having interactions, I can talk to people I disagree with. I can talk to dumb people. I have a problem with that, like people that don't know what they're talking. But one of the things that infuriates me is when someone is unwilling to admit what they're really trying to say. Like I might be wrong, but I'll say this is what I think, and then you might say that's stupid for XYZ, and I might say, oh, you're right, But like
I get in trouble for that all the time. I'm like, nah, fuck that. I would like when I was on Ippy Dippy Rumble, and I was like, nah, fuck that. You know, Ashley Babbitt, fuck all you conservatives saying like, you know, talking about police brutality against her. Like, you shit on her fucking name. No, she was a goddamn martyr. She knew what she was doing when she was crawling through that fucking window. And what she was trying to do was make a goddamn point and a message that like our government institutions were completely fucking failing and that there was fraud in this election. They were like, whoa, you can't say that. I'm like, she's a martyr and a hero. Fuck all you conservatives trying to be like, well, what about police brutality? It's like, you don't give a fuck when it's somebody that the left's champions. Like, you're so goddamn inconsistent. Like, just say what you mean. And what you mean is that you fucking, she was a martyr.
Right. And so like when I debated Jangles, this is what happened. My friend Aftershock was moderating it. And so we're debating on CRT, and he would say something and then I would be like, and he's so aggro. He's just, I read all the books. I read like 6 books, so I know. And I'd be like, okay, well, here's a specific quote. I said, what author should we be looking at? He says Stefanik and Delgado. I say, okay, here's a specific quote. They say, you don't know what you're talking about. I read their books. I'm like, well, this is from like page 17. Like, what
are you talking about? It's Stefanik and Gonzalo. Like, I don't like, do you want me to quote the edition of A Critical Race Theory and Introduction?
And
like,
he started doing that. He's like, what's the exact name of the book? What page is it? I was like, give me a second, right? Because I didn't have the book in front of me, but what I had was someone analyzing the book, and he had it cited, right? So I was like, let me see what the citation says. Anyways, he just kept over and I didn't say that. And then 10 minutes of the debate would be me like, okay, did you say this? Well, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I guess I said that. And did you say this? Well, blah, 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 blah. And so then 15 minutes later, and what I got him to admit, it's shocking. I'll send you it's only an hour.
I'll check it out sometime.
Yeah. But what he admits is this. I was like, look, they talk about with this critical pedagogy, it's not about educating, it's about creating activists. And I was like, do you think that's a good thing? And after 20 minutes, he's like, yes. And I was like, and do you think that the activists we create should share your values, sort of? And he's like, yes. And I say, are part of those values that Trump and all of his supporters are racist? And he says, yes. And I'm like, so therefore you're saying that our schools should be teaching people that support Trump are racist and we need to reject them? And he says, yes. And I was like, now it took 30 minutes to go step by step and get him to admit it.
Nothing but net. You know what I mean? Like,
right. And I'm trying to explain to my audience, I'm like, this is what you're up against, right? You're not up against people that like, because you can almost sympathize and deal with the people that are like, well, look, racism was really bad and we need to really focus on that. And it still could have ramifications today. All of that's true, right? That's all true. But that's not what's happening here. It's not just like, hey, by the way, I don't know about you. When I was in high school, I went to public school, right? Like we'd watch Gettysburg, the movie, and we'd talk about the Civil War, and we talked about black civil rights leaders, and we talked about how heinous slavery was, and maybe we could have done more. Okay, whatever. I think that there's a hyper focus on that anyways, but that's not what they're suggesting. They're suggesting this social emotional learning, right, where it creates activists and it seeks to break people down. It seeks to break particularly children down.
Well, it says quote, to create citizens engaged in critical democracy. That's what the transformative social emotional learning is designed to do. It's like it talks about getting children into their fear zone, which is basically like they use a lot of academic flowery language to describe Maoist struggle sessions with your children. Right. To like break, and it says that we need to break their biases and break their ideas of individualism, capitalism, things like that. And you're like, yo, dog, like This isn't like just like, like, oh, we're just teaching like an accurate representation of history. It's like, no, dude, you're teaching children to engage in critical democracy to destroy capitalism and individualism. And like, that's literally like blatant. And it's like in the first fucking chapter of Stefanik and Delgado, introduction to critical race theory, an introduction, they specifically say that we have to get rid of the Constitution because the Constitution is colorblind and like it will never be an equitable system, and therefore the Constitution and American liberalism and capitalism all need to be destroyed. And it's like,
right, and
then they just act like that's not what CRT is. And I'm like, it's in the fucking book by the experts in the first chapter. Like, how do you deny that?
And it says things, it specifically attacks the First Amendment. It says people use free speech as an excuse.
As to be racist, yeah.
That's right, to push through this patriarchy, heteronormative. And here's the beauty of it, right? Like, I don't have the technical language of this, right? I always called it cultural Marxism, but it's describing sort of the same thing, right? And the beauty of it is you could break people down based on an infinite amount of categories, right? You could use race, you could use social status, you could use ability, you could use attractiveness, you could use age, like any of this stuff. And what they're offering is they break the emotional learning part of it is, right? Instead of embracing facts, what they do is they break these children down and say, you as an individual have these, sins, or you have these things that are wrong with you, but we offer you something different. You could be part of this collective, right? And so I think that's why you're seeing so much.
It's Nietzschean slave morality. It's Nietzschean slave morality. Very, very similar to Christianity, right? Which is that, you create a moral system of sins and things of that nature. The difference between Christianity and Marxism here, in terms of slave morality, is that the Christian is of the ethos of turn the other cheek, and that their salvation occurs in the next life. Whereas the Marxist is of the opinion that salvation must come in this life, and not to turn the other cheek, but to collectively use acts of violence against the master morality of like the unhinged capitalist class of oppressors. But they're very similar in the sense that it's a collective ideology of like, a shared moral system of like, justifying their own failures or inadequacies or fears or anxieties or even their good things in life, all based upon, a sense of moral duty and obligation.
And here's the thing, right? Like, this is what I consider myself a Christian, though I'm non-denominational. I just believe in being Christ-like, basically. But what separates me, like the first debate I ever had with Big Papa Fascist, right, was gay marriage. And what I envision the country to be, it doesn't matter what my moral system is. The laws of this country and the setup of our government should have the idea of personal liberty first and foremost. So I believe more than you that a government needs to exist, right? But I think that it should always default to encouraging personal liberty unless there is no other option in a particular course. So maybe we need taxation for roads and things like that. You would say, well, there's ways to go about it other than that. But that's basically where I'm coming from. So because of that, I don't believe that we should outlaw gay marriage. I don't believe government has a place in marriage, but if it does, it can't discriminate based on consenting adult, sexual orientation of consenting adults. So if two consenting adults want to get married and they're both men, the government to me isn't allowed to say, we allow a man and a woman, but not a man and a man. Even though it's not my personal moral belief, but if it was my personal moral belief that would be immoral, I would still say, I don't give a shit. But what I see, like, when you talk to people, because there's this idea of the pendulum needing to swing the other way, which I agree, there are people that say, well, we should teach theology in schools, right? If they're going to do it, then fine, we'll do it too. We'll just say, yeah, you have the right model. We should create activists, or we should create people designed to kind of promulgate our societal.
Can we not? Can we not?
Well, my view is like, it's like, you know what I want them to teach? Reading, math. Like, how about that? How about we focus on that? And then you as a parent at home, you can do your best to teach your values and stuff like that. But I'm sick and tired of this idea that we're trying to, like, increasingly government education is such a sham. We have people that we're shoving through the system that they can't read at a second grade level, and we're giving them degrees. And we're falling behind the rest of the world, and it's all intentional anyways. They want to dumb down the population. It's intentional as far as I'm concerned. But it's like, to me, that's where the fight is. It's like, just get out of this crap altogether. If we are going to have public education, which we probably shouldn't, but to the extent where it exists, the role should just be the agreed upon, like, things that we say are necessary to further your education, get a job. Civics, math, writing, things like that.
No, I think what is really, I mean, like, obviously this is going to be the libertarian in me, right? But, I think it's the right system. I would say two things about kind of your arguments. About one, I'll come back to public education, but the first one I'll come back to Christianity and gay marriage, right? It's very interesting because we were just looking at a debate about is libertarianism and Christianity compatible. What I would say ultimately, right, is that aggression, non-aggression principle, is something that can be derived directly from logic. That to be an aggressor is not something that you can argue. You cannot argue that it is a moral right to aggress upon someone else without engaging in a performative contradiction. We could go through argumentation ethics. It's a really long time thing. And if you want, I can send you over a mock-up I have of it. Sure. And that's that like my notes that I use to like better understand it. But what I would say is, if you follow me through on this, right, that it's illogical to claim to have the right to use violence or theft against other people as a moral claim, because it goes against your very idea of argumentation, which is that you must make factually true statements, or not factually, but logically true, logically valid statements. And if you make a logically valid statement in argumentation, then you recognize that the other person has the ability to make truth claims, right? And that you're engaged in a form of argumentation with them. And so if you were to disengage and to say, well, I have the right to, let's say, steal from you, or I have the right to commit violence against you, that you're engaged in a performative contradiction because you're making the assertion of an individual that is capable of making your own truth value claims. The logic in it gets complicated. But what I would say is that it is my opinion that because of this, that we do not have the right to aggress upon other people for things that they choose to do if they are not harming other people. And that if your interpretation of the word of God is that we not only have the right, but we have the Christian duty to persecute other people for doing things that we disagree with in that regard, and that logic is given by God, logos, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, right? The breath of life of logos, of having free will, unless you're like a Calvinist, maybe, I don't know. But right, that's a whole nother contradiction. Right. But if that is if that's the gift of God, and that's God's creation, is logic, and you're going against logic based off of your interpretation of the Word of God, that I think your interpretation of the Word of God is wrong. That instead, these are moral prescriptions on God on what you should do and what is and isn't sin, not whether or not you can or should use violence against those that do sin, that don't sin against you, that sin only against themselves. That's what I would say. It's an
interesting thought. I'd have to think through the idea of sort of logos being morality. I think it's an interesting thought. I haven't gone into that depth of the level of it. For me, what I say is this, and I understand this pisses
it's not morality.
Christians off.
I wouldn't want to be real clear. Our belief is not that it's morality, but that we can take multiple other moral claims and prove them to be not logically valid. And the opinion is, can you make a moral claim that is not logical? And if you can't make if your claim is illogical, then it can't be true. Therefore, the moral claim. So it's not about what we ought to do. It's about invalidating moral claims that are not logically true.
Okay, all right. So I would have to, what I say is this. I don't know. I've asked people that are far more scholarly when it comes to their interpretation of Christianity and the Bible, and I can't quote you chapter and verse. My understanding is this, and I don't know if you would know this. I don't know if you consider yourself a Christian. I always was brought up and raised that basically the same sin that is homosexuality is the sin of premarital sex or oral sex or sex for not procreation, right? And for me, it's I don't see the big movement to freak out to everyone who's ever got a BJ. You know, I don't see that. And so for me, it's I always just interpret it very simply, which was, it's not for me to judge. If you're right that it's a sin, then they'll have more to answer to than me when they die, right? And so for me, all I could do is say, regardless if it's a sin or not, I'm not looking at my government saying that it enforces this doctrine. And I don't just mean because of, archaic interpretations of separation between church and state and what was outlined. I mean in just quite a more literal sense right now, which is I don't want that. I don't want an Islamic theocracy. I don't want a Christian theocracy. And so for me, I am unpersuaded by the morality claims of homosexuality when it comes to should they be allowed to get married. It literally does not factor into my calculus. Having said that, I go a step further and say, I know people that are gay, that are in love with each other, and I refuse to think that that's something that I should condemn. I'm sorry, that's just how I feel. And I understand, but the Bible says otherwise. That's fine. I'm just telling you how I feel. And
he's like, dog, I got no problem with cafeteria religion.
Right. If I die and God makes me answer for that position, I'll try my best. And I know that sounds arrogant. I don't mean it that way. All of us have some sort of sin. I'm just saying that's just how I personally feel. And when I ran for Congress, I ran in the most conservative district here in Pennsylvania. I ran for a special election. The special election, it was because this guy, Tom Marino, won the election in 2018. Then he got cancer real bad. So he had to drop out. But he was smart. Instead of dropping out before the election, which would have defaulted the Democrat winning, he won and then dropped out, which then meant there had to be another election, a special election. But because of that, there wasn't a primary. Each party in Pennsylvania sets their own rules on what to do. So as the Republicans, which this was like, Republicans won this district more than like Democrats win in California. So it's whoever wins the Republican nomination wins. They had what was called conferees. So there was something like 215 conferees, and these were just people that volunteered to be the only voters. So I got to call like every one of them. And there was probably 15 or 20 when I would say, what's your most important issue? Let's talk about it. They'd say gay marriage. Now, me and you are smart enough to know if you're in the most conservative district with Republicans that are volunteering to vote and they say gay marriage, you know what their position is. They're not like, I'm pro gay marriage, right?
Right.
So I told them, I was like, yeah, I'm for gay marriage. Then I had 4 or 5 people tell me I was going to burn in hell, and my response to them was, listen, I know what you wanted me to say and I didn't. Doesn't that at least tell you that I'm not pandering to you on the issues you agree with me on? And if you're willing, all the other issues that you think are important, if you're willing to burn them all down just because you want to keep gay marriage illegal, I think that it's a huge mistake. I think that because you're going to lose a large swath of people that otherwise would be like, you know what? I agree with you on limited government, limited taxation. I agree with you on sort of corruption of the Democrats, of fighting back against this global warming, against critical race theory. But sorry, we're not going to vote for you because we think that
I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't vote for you. And unless you proved.
Do you vote anyway?
The only time that I'm willing to vote is if someone has a proven track record of reducing the size and scope of the state. Mm-hmm. That's my only goal. That's my only goal. My goal is to use the vote as a defensive tool to reduce the power of the state. And if someone has a track record and has the right wording, and I'm willing to take that gamble about what might be some form of violence against other people by using that, you know what I mean? Like, for example, Rand Paul, right? Do I agree with everything on Rand Paul? No. If Rand Paul was the Republican nominee for the GOP, I'd vote for him for president. Why? Because I know he'd be the only motherfucker, despite the fact that it's been in the fucking the RNC's party platform for 20 years to audit the Fed. He'd be the only one that would actually fucking audit the Fed. You know what I mean? Like I know that he would reduce the size and scope of the state, and that's my goal. I don't care if, because like I make this argument to Democrats. It's a great one. You can use it. You can steal it. Okay. What I say is, okay, let's say tomorrow your favorite politician comes out and they want to get rid of all private healthcare and they want to adopt a healthcare system just like is in Canada and the UK, but it's even better and it's more efficient. Would you vote for that person? And they say, of course, yes. They almost always bite that bullet, right? It's such a perfect trap because I go, okay, now everyone that's in the country that's right wing is mad, right? Now, do you legitimately think that the Republicans are then going to come in and just bring back private health insurance? That's not what the Republicans will do. What they might do, though, is they might make hormone replacement therapy illegal for every single person in the entirety of the United States. So my question to you is, why are you such a fucking transphobe? And why do you deny people trans rights and right to healthcare? Because that's what you voted for, because you gave the power to the government. And it's not just when they do things you like, it's also when they do things that you don't like, which is why I don't want the fucking government involved in this shit.
Well, I don't disagree. And you might vote for me if you heard what my platform is.
Maybe I was just fucking with you.
All right. Right, I know. But you actually make a serious point that's worth considering, like a track record. It's easy for me to come on and say, like, if you're on the phone with me and I'm just saying shit, it's like, okay. Like, because here's
you're a
the thing,
Twitch streamer. You're a little different, right? Like we can.
You could look at my record, right?
You can, or you can very look at what you say all the time and know that like you're probably serious. Yeah,
that is true. But I think that, look, I'm not trying to be arrogant, and I don't know you very well, but I think just in our interactions with each other, I could say this about both of us. I think that if we want to sell ourselves to someone and we're willing to be disingenuous, we could do it. There are easy ways to listen to someone with a few quick questions and intuit what their positions will be. Most people are very predictable. If you find out their position on healthcare, for example, you could probably guess what their position on gay marriage is.
No, you don't need to do any of that. I wouldn't need to do any of that. You just call them, you talk to them, you represent who you are, right? You give your like real super quick spiel, and then you'd be like, look, I think there's a lot of issues in this country, and one of the biggest issues right now is like, what do we do with our children? Like, do you have kids? And then just talk to them about their kids for a minute. And the way that they talk about their kids, or whether they don't have kids, and the way they describe children will tell you everything you need to fucking know about these people's positions.
You're right. That's absolutely right. And plus, a lot of times when you're talking to someone, there's a bunch of surrounding things anyways. Like, where are you meeting this person at, right? Yeah, I had a friend that was a landlord, and I never thought of this. You know what he told me the number one thing was when deciding to rent to someone? He followed them back to their car. And he's like, if their car's a mess, they ain't renting from me. Because if they can't take care of their property, why would they take care of my property?
Right. And if their car's clean and put together, like, it's like, okay, this is a tidy person.
That's right. And so it's sort of what you're saying there, right? Where there's, based on things that are perceived as like non-political or non-ideological, you could intuit like where people are going to go with these things. And so, I see that a lot. I go to a lot of Republican events, and I hear a lot. When I ran, for example, I don't know if you'd be interested in this. I could talk about it a little. When I ran,
I'm a talker, dude. We'll go wherever. I don't care. Yeah. I do want to get to McCarthy at some point, though.
Yeah, I definitely do. But I got until at least midnight. So as long as you're cool, I'm cool with it.
I'm cool.
Okay. So in a way, I was a little intimidated, right? Because it's like you have this idea. If you found yourself at a fancy restaurant with like 10 heart surgeons, you have this idea based on the perceived skill of that job, the type of people they'll be. They'll be very intelligent, stoic people.
They're all fucking idiots.
Get there and they're lighting farts on fire and like they're doing shots off each other's ass. You'd be like, wait, what? This the guy that's gonna operate my heart tomorrow? That's sort of what it was like to me when I got in a room with all these people. And this is something you would have been a fan of me, right? So we get in a room, and the first event I did was the best one. Every one of the candidates that showed up were in the room, and it's at a diner. And the people one by one would ask a question, and they'd say, who wants to answer? Well, I'm a nobody. So in my head, I'm thinking, I need to talk as much as possible. They don't know me, right? So I'd answer every question. Be like, yeah, I'll answer. And so I was talking about how bloated our government is. And I was talking about, as a representative for federal Congress, the 10th Amendment's very clear. If it's not specifically outlined in the Constitution, it shouldn't be the right of the federal government. It should be left to the states. And so the Democrats have bloated, and the Republicans have gone along with it. And so now we have all of these executive orders and executive decree, and we've sort of lost sight of the separation of powers, and not just at the federal level, but at the state and local level as well. And everyone agrees with me. Everyone stands up afterwards and is like, I agree. Very next person asks the question, says, what do you think about marijuana, and what would you do to keep it illegal? And every single person raised their hand except me. And I was like, now wait a minute. What did you just say about the 10th Amendment? Didn't you just say that the government? And I was like, can't you see? And basically their argument to me was, but this is a very important issue. I was like, that's what the Democrats say. Every single time you say that's not their part, the state doesn't have a role in that, the Democrats say, but this time it's important. And that's what you say on the other hand. You're like, well, this time it's important with marijuana. Maybe you're right. Maybe everything you say, I don't even have to argue that marijuana is good. I just have to say that the Constitution that you're swearing to uphold specifically says that you have no damn right to speak on this.
But interstate commerce, what are you talking about?
Right.
Interstate commerce, brother.
They real quick after that, the next event I went to, and I didn't realize my wife was there, and my wife's like, you'd love my wife. She's making fun of me the whole time. Everyone else is sitting there like stoic, and my wife's like, tell this guy to shut up, and everyone would be laughing. And when I left, my wife was like, she's like, the guy that ended up winning, his name was Fred Keller. He wouldn't shake hands with me. I shook hands with everyone else. Everyone was nice. He was a career state level politician. He had an assistant, nice suit and tie, and I tried to shake his hand and he was like real snarky with me. And my wife's like, was sitting by him and she's like, he's intimidated by you. And I was like, what? She's like, she's like, I looked at his phone. He was Googling the 10th Amendment. Like, no bullshit. God. And so the next event I went to, they're like, hey, look, it's Mr. 10th Amendment. Mr. 10th Amendment here. Like it was a joke at me. Like, and I'm just shaking my head. And then the next thing that happened was I had someone pull me aside. The next event was in Center County. Center County split in half. And the representative in my county, Glenn Thompson, also represents half of Center County. And he's the most senior Republican in the House in Pennsylvania. And he told everyone that he hates the Freedom Caucus. And so this guy pulls me aside that's running and he says, Rob, I heard that GT told everyone to ask you, and this event was one-on-one. You went in as an individual and talked to everyone. So you didn't get to hear all the questions. And he said, they're going to ask you if you support the Freedom Caucus. What are you going to say? I said, yeah. And he's like, well, don't say that. GT told him to strike everyone's name and I was like, well, I'm not going to lie.
Right.
I'll argue why the Freedom Caucus is good. But those events, when I started to see, I had this like apprehension that it's like, even though I knew that politicians were incompetent in some ways and were corrupt, I at least thought they'd be impressive people. They weren't. Like I walked out of there thinking, my God, I am the most qualified. I'm a drunk, who makes $15 an hour at the time. And I think I'm more qualified than every person.
Yeah. One of the things I did, what I thought was really interesting, like we were doing our presentation on McCarthy actually. And somebody brought up the idea of like, politicians, because I recited his Wheeling speech in West Virginia, right, which was the kind of the speech in early February, 2 weeks after Higler was charged with not treason but perjury, because it was past statute of limitations on treason. But the big kind of thing that started McCarthy. And people were like, oh, that's such a great speech. And I was like, dude, we used to have like elites that were like well-educated and cared and knew what the fuck they were talking about. So I like shared my favorite Abraham Lincoln quote from his temperance address, right? I think it's 1859, 1858. And then I did the same thing with a paragraph from the King Cotton speech, justifying slavery. Right. And when you read both of them are better than anything you've ever heard out of a politician's mouth in the last 20 years. Like they're both like well-reasoned, passioned, well-structured arguments with language that just like strikes to your core. And it's just like, it's like, dude, this guy, Calhoun, right? Like he's literally justifying slavery better, and like you almost feel willing to go with him better than any argument that is morally justified from anybody else. And it really just shows a poverty of our elites in kind of like this degradation of like the hedonistic kind of state that we live in, where the wealthy and the powerful have gotten away with nepotism and corruption for so long that they're not even competent anymore.
That's right. I totally agree. And that's something that like the ability, when you listen to those, because that was what I was interested in. I went to college for speech. And so, I'm very interested in famous speeches. I remember one time getting in a fight with my professor over William Jennings Bryan Cross of Gold speech, right? And he was arguing against the gold standard because at that point, banks were trying to manipulate currency by buying up, like basically all of the gold, right? Before
right.
Fiat
And then Congress would do like silver manipulation and shit like that. Yeah.
Right. So Jennings Bryant was arguing to go to a silver standard, right? So he has this really cool line that's like, "You will not crucify me on this cross of gold," right? It doesn't matter what you think of the issue. He was making salient points, and he was doing so the double, the double power of not only being smart and making good points, even if you disagree with them, they're intelligent points, but also being impassioned and a charismatic speaker. And the professor's like, "Can you believe sort of currency and how we value currency used to be a big issue?" And I'm like, yeah, it should
Because
be
it
right
still
now.
is.
The
What are you
Federal
talking
Reserve-
about?
I'm like,
Oh,
if
God.
fiat currency is a disaster, and like the professor's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, and this was the heyday of Ron Paul. This is probably like 2006, 2007. I'm like, man, you need to listen to some
God.
Ron Paul. You're screwing up here.
God, how old are you?
I agree. I'm 38. Yeah. So I was.
It's so weird because like you're only 7 years older than me. I'm about to be 32, right? Or so 6 maybe. But like it's just weird when you think back to like when you were in like early college or something and I was still like a child. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute, what?
You're my wife's age. I'll tell a gross story about my wife. Like,
I'm good.
I met my wife.
I'm good. All right, we're just gonna go ahead and mute the stream real quick. All right, boys. So, anyways, no, I'm just kidding.
So, knew her tangentially, but like sort of her 21st birthday was the first day I really talked to her as a one-on-one. It was always a crew, right? I would be with a crew and she would have a crew. So I talked to her and we started dating. So she was 21 at the time, but I'm 6 years older than her. And it never felt weird, 21 to 27. It didn't feel that weird until I met her grandma, and her grandma was showing me these scrapbooks. And she's like, oh, here's 2002. Courtney was in 6th grade. And I was a senior in high school at that point. And that's the first time I was like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is weird. It's like, oh God, I was committing all kinds of sins and debauchery. And like, this is like, I don't want to see her like schoolgirl outfit in middle school.
Right.
And like, think about like what I was doing. All right. So.
But you know, it is funny. Let me do the McCarthy thing. Let me ask you this first, right? Because I'm streaming too. I think I know McCarthy and my audience knows McCarthy, but probably in the most shallow way possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the best way to start this conversation, what I wanted to ask you is, can you explain how McCarthy got to the point where he thought that it was sort of important to start investigating communism in our government, and why that came about and how it came about?
So I've got a 25 slide presentation for this.
Oh, let's do it. Awesome.
Okay, so we've got the historical context, the psychology, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slides that say leading up to McCarthyism, because people think I'm just going to get into it. Everyone on my channel that was here Tuesday, because that was when I was planning on doing it, I needed to get it out and do it. So like I didn't wait to like do the presentation with you, so we can kind of do it a little bit quicker. You know what I mean? But the reason I did it then is the whole reason I'm bringing this up is McCarthyism became this weird thing because James Lindsay came out and said McCarthy was wrong. He didn't go far enough. Like, we got to get these people out of our schools, right? And comic Dave Smith, you know, the anarcho-capitalist and comedian that's on Joe Rogan all the time, and Michael Malice and stuff. He basically was like, people were talking trash about it and like, libertarians don't do this, because the LP retweeted it. And he was like, fuck you don't speak for all libertarians. And it just became this in the Libertarian Party and like all the liberty people on Twitter. It became like every libertarian I follow had a comment, and half of them were like, how dare you support McCarthy? This is insane. This is ridiculous. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And the other half were like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. McCarthy was based. He was an American hero. So
you on Twitter. So I saw this, and I had listened. I don't know if you know who Razor Fist is, right?
Yeah,
but I'd listened.
Yeah, I know who Razor Fist is. Yeah,
right. So in the slightest way, I heard him do like 5 minutes on McCarthy one time, and I thought that's
Hollywood was always
red.
red. Yeah.
Right. My interest in this is I find that it's always important to challenge sort of these narratives we have that I don't know what to call, almost like a taboo. Like, there are things that we just assume are absolutely true.
Okay.
And I don't think that we should do that with anything, right? Like, I'm even willing to listen to someone tell me that like horrible historical figures like Stalin were good people. They weren't, but I would listen to someone say it because it's important to have a philosophical and knowledgeable underpinning of why we believe the things we do.
Well, I mean,
and
like Stalin would be horrible, right? But if someone tried to justify Lysenko and Lysenkoism, like, I would be like, fuck you, you're a monster, you starve people to death. But like, there's probably like some farming techniques and ingenuity that he did that was positive that is completely buried by history, because like, fuck Lysenko. And like, there might even be valuable lessons to glean from that, even if I can still maintain fuck you, Lysenko, right?
I'll just say this real quick, and then like, just consider this. So the way I'm looking at it says, let's say that Trump goes to jail, right? And heaven forbid, even worse than that, far worse than that, in fact, that we have 30 years of just sort of insane corruption, and the media and the people that write history just say Trump was the worst ever and blah, 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 blah. What will your grandchildren think? They might just, at that point, it's conceivable that our culture could just be like, oh yeah, Trump, that guy that sold out the country, he was Benedict Arnold, right? But if you're alive right now and a Trump supporter, you're like, no, that's not what happened.
No.
What if that's what happened with McCarthy? That's the question I'm asking.
Trump's not a traitor. Right. He's not a traitor. He's a narcissist, and he wasn't competent enough to be president. That's it.
Exactly. Well,
Who cared? Who cared? Cared deeply. Trump cared. And interesting, and the reason I brought up, I thought this was so interesting to bring Trump into this, and another little thing. Do you know who Trump's mentor was?
Was it Roy Cohn?
Roy Cohn was his mentor.
Yeah,
the lawyer for McCarthy, right? The staunch anti-communist, right? That helped with all the investigations. Roy Cohn's not actually in this presentation because you can't cover everything. Thanks to the follows, guys. We can't cover everything, but Roy Cohn is actually his mentor. But let me get into this. Let me just show non-video participants and show my screen, and then we'll do a preview. I've only got so many monitors, guys, so chat is going to be on a small monitor, so I apologize if I'm not super engaged with chat, but mark my type. All right,
big money in libertarianism.
So before I get into this, I want to be honest, right? Like, no plagiarism things here, right? I got a lot of this information from a book blacklisted by history. I got a lot of this information from a presentation that is banned now. That's hard to find copies, and they get taken down regularly, from Stefan Molyneux. And he's done several of these. And if you can find all of his work, because it's not always on his it's not on his website as far as I can find, but you can find BitChute and YouTube links if you like search for it. They come up, they disappear, they come up, they disappear. But this isn't all me, right? Like, I'm not some historical genius, right? Like, I pulled a lot of this. I've verified all of these things, and I've read the book Blacklisted by History before. But I just want to like make that clear that, like, if you see some similarities between that and this, yeah, because I fucking copied that shit because some of his points were really good. Like, that's just a fact.
Fun.
Right. But I just want people to be aware that I'm not like presenting myself as like this beautiful genius expert when I like half of this shit is copied from him.
Right.
Okay. So McCarthyism, the untold truth. So first things first, the false narrative, right? I think this is kind of like what a lot of people believe. So the first is that McCarthy was on a witch hunt, trying to find witches that didn't exist, that he was looking for communists that like under every rock and under every pillow, and that there really weren't any, or that it was way overblown, that he attacked innocent people, that he went after people. McCarthy is not associated with the House Un-American Activities Committee. In fact, the House Un-American Activities Committee is occurring for years before McCarthy ever gets involved. And the biggest hint that the HUAC, or the HUAC, doesn't have anything to do with him is in the first fucking word, House, because McCarthy was a senator.
Right.
The next one is that he used the state against civilians. He never did that. The only people that he brought up publicly were witnesses that refused to answer questions, and were required to make public under the Hatch Act of 1936. I got to look again, right? And lastly, that McCarthy lied and promoted spying and attacking neighbors and like led to this Red Scare. That's not McCarthy's fault at all. And what McCarthy did was he was a fucking hero. None of these are true. Now, before I get into the slides, I want to talk a little bit about McCarthy. McCarthy grew up as a farmer. He didn't get a high school education until after adulthood. He joined World War II and was a tail gunner. During World War II, he was a tail gunner, which is one of the most dangerous jobs ever, and has multiple medals for the valor and things that he did in World War II. The media later tried to bury these after the smears didn't work, that he was a psycho because he had problems from war. But he did die in 1957, possibly from alcoholism. Who knows? We'll get into that too. So,
how long was he when did he get into the Senate? Do you know?
48,
or more
I believe.
Okay. And when are we talking is the time period where he started sort of investigating?
February 1950.
Okay.
He is his first speech. Now, what was he doing in the background? We don't really know. Like, we know that he was friends with the former Secretary of the Navy. We know that he spoke to Whittaker Chambers, who was the whistleblower in the Pumpkin Patch Papers from the State Department. We know that he got documents from another individual that was a reformed communist. So we know that he was getting documents from multiple sources and multiple people calling out a lot of things. He doesn't have the onus, really, to get involved until a year after a young senator from Massachusetts called out the problems of corruption and communism in the State Department. And you guys might know him as by the name of John F. Kennedy.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I mean, I knew that JFK called it up, but I didn't know that he was sort of a precursor to McCarthy.
Mm-hmm. He was calling this out before McCarthy was calling it out. So the first thing I want to talk to, and I think conservatives kind of get this, but like maybe normies don't, your audience probably gets it, but just the kind of the historical context of what's going on. We think of communism today as like this dangerous ideology that's infecting our schools. And what you have to understand about the early 1950s is communism is an entirely different beast. We just got out of World War II. The USSR had taken most of Eastern Europe. 1950 starts the invasion of Korea. In the 1940s, right, Albania, Bulgaria, East Germany, Romania, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, North Korea, China, and Syria all fall or are falling to communism. Like, this is an ideology that is sweeping the world, right? And it's like just totally different, right? It's not like we see it today.
And I think that what people don't understand is it really was a bipolar world. It wasn't a given that the United States or capitalism was going to win out. I mean, back then it was very real, up in the air.
In fact, in his Wheeling speech, he specifically talks about how the amounts of people living under communism, right, were like leading up to like World War II, like right after World War II, was a 9-to-1 ratio, meaning that free liberal democracies was 9-to-1, and at the time of his speech, it was 5-to-4 in favor of communism. That had happened in 4 years. It had gone from 10% of the planet was communist to basically 55% of the planet was communist.
That's crazy.
Right. And like, we don't have that same historical context.
Right. We think of the way, and even me, I'll say this, when you think of communism, what you think right now is like Russia, where if you sell them a pair of blue jeans, you can sell it for like $300 because things are so shitty right there, right? That's sort of the mentality. It's like, oh, okay, it's not a good mentality, but, you know, it's limited to this very small area of the world, and it doesn't really affect us. That wasn't the case, you know?
Yeah. So moving forward, communist influence was spreading to Southeast Asia, and South America, right? So like, it's not just these places. It's also Korea's next. Vietnam might fall. Laos might fall. They're getting involved in South America. They're in Brazil. They're in Argentina. Like the world feels like it's closing in. People are fucking scared. And of course you have the Truman Doctrine and the beginning of the Cold War. This is a Cold War. People think of a Cold War as like a meme of 80s movies. And they don't realize that like the real scary shit of the Cold War is not the 1980s. It's the 1950s. That's when that shit was terrifying. So communism's on the rise. I don't want to get into this. This is more of an interesting part for the presentation. Long story short, there was a lot of war propaganda on both sides. Like I'll just show some of it. Like this is just some of the cool stuff from like the Soviet side. But it's also understood that like while we were vilifying Nazism, America had been deeply, deeply hit with pro-communist, pro-Russia, USS or Soviet propaganda, as did the Soviet people, because we were allies with them in the war. And so to this day, there still is like, oh, the Nazis are evil, but like the commies weren't that bad.
Right.
Right? Like you can wear a Che Guevara t-shirt outside. Try wearing a swastika t-shirt outside.
Right. A hammer and sickle's fine. It's trendy.
Right. Right. And so like there was a lot of communist and Marxist kind of ideas at the time. And another thing, like this isn't in the slide, but like another thing to think about is that like as industrialization got better, it appeared to make things worse. Right. So even though standard of living was going up, even though wealth was going up, economic disparities were going down, people were moving into cities, pollution was increasing to higher degrees. A A lot of the suffering that used to happen out on the farms was now all happening in densely populated areas and poverty and the inner cities and things like that. So even though like things were getting better because of capitalism, what everyone saw was a society that was getting worse. Mm-hmm. So there's that. But I mean, yep. But moving on. Here we go. So President Truman is elected from 1945 to 1953. We'll talk about Truman quite a bit from this, right? But focusing on McCarthy, not on Truman, right? Now, Truman issues an executive order in his first year of office called the Federal Loyalty Security Program, right? This executive order basically says that you can fire for treason, any federal government employee, you can fire them for treason or sympathetic association with, quote, communists, fascists, or totalitarians. Now, this is really important because when people talk about McCarthy going on a witch hunt, they talk about McCarthy like doing things the government's not supposed to do. But Truman's executive order and later the Hatch Act both state that you're supposed to fire people if they have any associations with communist, fascist, or totalitarian regimes or parties, including even being married to these people. And the burden of proof is not to prove that they have these associations, right? But if there is reasonable suspicion that they have them, that's reason enough under the Hatch Act, at least, to fire them. Like if we have reasonable suspicion that you're a communist, you're not supposed to be in our government. And the same is true with Nazis, right? So, just as a bigger zoom out, from 1947 to 1956, over 2,500 government employees are fired under the Federal Loyalty Security Program executive order, right? That's 2,500 hello, Mark. That's 2,500 communist, fascists, totalitarians, or people that are like married to them or like were in the Communist Party at some time in a 9-year period just under this one executive order.
So brief pause here. This order, although it mandated firing them, did it impose criminal penalties? Like,
no.
Were they locked up or anything? It
nope.
just was, you can't be an employee of the government.
In fact, many of them would be fired and then would move to another government job or department. Yeah. Funny. And then, of course, we could go into this, but just leading up to McCarthyism as well, it's important to know that in, oh my God, let me make sure I get the right year because this is before McCarthy, right? 46, right? Communist spies had infiltrated the British government and the American government and had brought the atomic bomb to the Russians, right? The Russians did not develop the atomic bomb by themselves. Spies in our government were able to leak the secrets to the Russians, and they were able, through espionage, to get the atomic bomb. People think it was this race. And like you can read this article, it's Smithsonian Magazine, right? Like it's not a controversial or unknown thing or contentious thing, is that communist spies and sympathizers were able to get the atomic bomb. Now, some of the people that were involved in this presumably might have been like people from mutually assured destruction. They were like hoping that like America and Russia would both have the atomic bomb and that it would stop war, right? Like, so it wasn't like they were all just evil commies, but they were targeted by, Moscow, and they did leak that information.
Right. And it's sort of irrelevant what their motivations were. The reality of the situation, like, did they leak this?
Do we condemn McCarthy? And these are the things that all happened before McCarthy.
That's right. Yeah, I got you. Yeah. And I'll be the first to admit that although I knew that there was espionage going on about nuclear weapons after their development, I legitimately thought that the majority of the Soviets developing it was them developing it. I knew that there was espionage attempts, but I was unaware that that's the predominant reason that they got the bomb.
The predominant reason that they got the bomb is that they had spies that in a spy network and sympathizers that were able to give it to them.
So the stakes would be very high. Like you're setting the stage. It's like the stakes are very high when McCarthy's going to enter. I mean, you're literally
we're just getting started. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, it's just getting started. So in 1946, State Department official Samuel Klaus issues the Klaus Report. Now we have records of people mentioning the Klaus Report, but we don't know that the Klaus Report is real. And the reason we don't know whether or not the Klaus Report is real is that it was sent to another senator as well, but McCarthy learned of it in 1950, but he never actually got a copy of it. because it magically disappeared from the State Department and nobody could find it. Or they're lying and they were just using this as a justification for their investigations. We don't know, right? So like, I don't want to like present like a one-sided argument. I want to be as unbiased and objective as I can here. We don't know if it existed, but supposedly it named 33 Communist Party officials and suspected an additional 90 of individuals that had infiltrated the United States State Department.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. When we're talking about communists, can you explain this for a second? We might look at communism as just a different economic system than capitalism. And so we would say, well, there shouldn't be something wrong about having a different economic theory. But when you're talking about these communists, you're basically talking about people that literally had the interest of the Soviet Union and communist nations above those. It's not just an academic disagreement.
No, it's not. Like these are the people that have infiltrated the State Department. These are people receiving money and telecommunications between Moscow, working for the Soviet regime as a means of trying to slow down, hamper, give information, and do whatever they can to bring down the Western imperialist America that needs to be destroyed so that we can usher in global communism.
And I think that's important to differentiate because, you know, when the smear on you, I saw Dylan Burns tweet this out to you, right? Where it was kind of like, well, how could a libertarian favor McCarthy or something like this? It's not just that you're saying we need to have the government force people to not have an economic belief.
Right.
You're saying these people were literally enemies of the state. They are operating at the behest of a foreign government that sought to destroy our country.
And not just our country, but the world.
Right. Yeah.
And wanted to cripple us to stop us from being able to do so. So the Klaus report disappears, but we know that Senator McCarthy at least learns of this report in his investigations. But he does get a set of documents from J.B. Matthews, which was a reformed communist. Okay, someone that was a true believer and saw, much like Whittaker Chambers, saw the horrors of Stalinism and was like, holy shit. What this leads to is not what I thought, basically, right? He compiles a bunch of documents for McCarthy saying that there are thousands of high-level communists in America between the State Department, different systems of government, in journalism, in Hollywood, et cetera, right? And this is years after the HUAC is already finding and proving that much of Hollywood is kind of controlled by Soviet propagandists, that they spent more money in Hollywood. Soviet Russia spent more money in Hollywood than like we spend today on many election campaigns.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, they were spending millions and tens of millions of dollars on little projects to try and get communist propaganda, in the masses from true believers in Hollywood. But that's not McCarthy, right? McCarthy's worried about, Hollywood's doing its own thing. HUAC's doing its own thing. He didn't give a fuck about that. Not really. He wasn't worried about journalists or the media or individual citizens having the wrong ideas. He was worried about spies. He was worried about espionage. Right. He was worried about crippled State Department and like our government being taken over, because he was a true believer, along with Roy Cohn, that like the ideals of freedom and democracy would win out, but that they can't win out if communist spies take over our government.
Well, and it's something I would love. Maybe we'll talk about after this, but it's something that I always find interesting with sort of this compromise mentality. I used to say this when I supported Ron Paul. Well, we need to come together is what a lot of people would say to me. And I was like, well, where's the coming together? Ron Paul thinks that the state should have incredibly limited power, and you think the state should have total power. What's the compromise? Give you 50% of power? And what happens is if you constantly leave the people that seek to have control over your life aggress a little by little, eventually, even if you have the better ideas for society, you'll lose out. And so I totally agree with that. It's like, even if you think that maximizing freedom in a capitalist system is better, you can't allow the system to be tilted so bad that you're saying, well, we'll leave our own freedoms be our greatest weakness by allowing outside state actors to spy and interfere in our system. You can't do that.
Like you might think the ideas will win, but that doesn't matter if foreign assets take over this structure of the state.
And that's why it's not a contradiction, right, for a libertarian. Or
I would say it's defensive violence, right? Yes. Like violence, I'm not a pacifist, right? Like if someone breaks into my home, right, and points a gun at me and says, I'm going to rape your wife and children, right? get in the corner and I happen to grab my firearm and kill them, I'm not an aggressor, right? Right. In the same way, if communist spies infiltrate the state and try and like siphon money in such a way to like bring about disaster and like undo our government in some way, like I want legalism and libertarianism. I don't want fucking communist spies infiltrating our fucking government. Like we should excise them. They all deserve free helicopter rides. So the Hatch Act is passed in 1946, which is basically a stronger version of that executive order, right? And the reason it's stronger, which by the way, the Hatch Act still exists today, except you're allowed to be a communist now and you're allowed to be a fascist. But what you're not allowed to do is present your political beliefs on air or anything as a neutral representative of the executive government. So plenty of people have been fired for like going on MSNBC and talking about their political opinions when they're like, you know, work for the CDC or something. They're not supposed to do that. That's the Hatch Act now. But at the time, what the Hatch Act was if there is a suspicion and you refuse to answer and you refuse to prove your innocence, that you're a communist, right? And we do an investigation and we determine that there's reasonable suspicion and you don't provide evidence that these suspicions are unfounded, then you're fired because we don't want communists in our government, right? Now, that's how it's supposed to work. But as with many government programs and laws, the way they're supposed to work and the way they do work are a little bit different. So, and this is kind of where you get that phrase, are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Like you hear that often, right? That's because McCarthy asked them in a closed meeting and they refused to answer. And he's like, oh, you refuse to answer? Then I'm going to bring you before Congress. And then he brings you before Congress and he says to you, are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And then they're like, I plead the fifth. And it's like, cool, we fire you because you refuse to self-incriminate and you refuse to perjure yourself.
Yeah. And again, like, just a brief aside, you know that the people on the left that condemn McCarthy the most are okay with this sort of strategic play, because if you switch those words to Russian now, they would say, right? Like, if let's say that Trump gets convicted for treason, wouldn't they be on the lookout saying, we don't want people that are trying to usurp our country and, you know, blah, 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 to be in these positions of power? They're engaged in a literal witch hunt, not one, but their witch hunts against a lawful person who ran for office in this country, not a foreign enemy. So they agree with the principle. It's just that they're sympathetic to the communists. So
yeah, absolutely. As was Truman, as was FDR. And we'll get into that a little bit. So the important thing too about understanding why McCarthy like needed to do what he did, right, is that the FBI can investigate and report, but the FBI doesn't prosecute. The Department of Justice, the Attorney General's office can prosecute, or Congress, right, can expose these people, right, and basically force the issue. And Congress is supposed to have access to all of the documents of like certain members of Congress, not all of Congress, right? But certain members of Congress are supposed to kind of oversee the FBI, and those individuals overseeing the FBI are supposed to have they're supposed to have access to all these top secret and classified, and Gamma and Delta and Privac and all that shit, like to know what's going on. We'll get into that in just a second, but it's important. J. Edgar Hoover warned him twice, but as early as 1945, J. Edgar Hoover told President Truman that his assistant to the Secretary of the Treasury, Dexter White, was a communist spy. He said, hey, this guy is a communist spy. He's number 2 in the Treasury Department. Okay? Wow. Truman told J. Edgar Hoover, sounds like a fairy tale, and refused to listen any further.
Wow.
Okay?
That's unreal.
In fact, President Truman in 1946 promoted him to be the executive director of the International Monetary Fund. He then later went on to found the World Bank, and he was the author of the Bretton Woods Initiative.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, which I'm aware of. But that's incredible. I had no clue.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy shit. Like you can, and if you doubt me, look up any of these things. Look up Dexter White. Like what's even more hilarious is that if you look up these names, you can find all this shit on Wikipedia. It's not even like esoteric hidden knowledge. It's just that propaganda works so well that you wouldn't know the names and you wouldn't go to investigate and you wouldn't go down the rabbit hole. And most people haven't.
Right.
What's far stronger is McCarthyism.
Right. Right, and that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because if you question this, just look at today in real time how you can see a narrative being crafted, right? So imagine
Russia, yeah.
Right, that's happening over a span of like a year or two. Imagine if you had 80 years of propaganda and controlling a narrative, what you would be able to convince people of.
Yeah,
and none of us
before
were
the
alive
age,
to see.
and also this is all before the age of the internet, you know.
Exactly.
So you had two generations raised on textbooks about McCarthyism with no way to verify unless they went to the library and went to one of those shika machines to try and find information on this shit. You know, I forget what those things are called, but I think it's funnier not knowing and just going shika. All right, so continuing on. Continuing on. So the FBI sent multiple warnings to the DOJ, Attorney General, and to the Truman administration throughout the 1940s, including, this is a funny little thing for some of you weirdos that get obsessed about the Rothschilds, including dozens about Edward Rothschild being a communist spy paid by Moscow. But McCarthy Commission got him fired. Just throwing that one out there. So the FBI was investigating. They sent hundreds of reports, and basically, for the most part, nothing happened. In fact, the FBI was well aware of and knew that Alger Hiss, who was number 3 and then eventually number 2 in the State Department, Laughlin Curry, who was another individual that was incredibly high up in multiple positions of government, as well as Dexter White, who was the Assistant Secretary to the Treasury, were all communist spies that were passing telegrams, that were getting money, and that were working directly for the communists.
Just to be clear, right? We're not talking about people that were like pacifists that are like, we should repair relationships.
No,
with the Soviet.
full-blown
You're
Marxists.
Talking about actually full-blown Marxists that were subverting the United States to empower the Soviets.
And most importantly, the biggest thing that they were doing in this time was doing everything they could to try and keep the West from helping and intervening in China. That's mostly what they were doing. Curry worked with FDR. Okay. Curry specifically, Laughlin Curry, we now know, leaked information to Moscow that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was willing to negotiate Poland away to the Russians, thus giving them a massive amount of ability to be able to demand that Poland be given to them, even though weakening FDR's position in negotiating. And it is, I don't know that it's likely per se, but it is possible that without Laughlin Curry doing this, Poland never would have been a communist country, period.
Wow.
Just from that alone,
crazy.
the United Nations and the U.S. might have been able to protect and keep Poland as a liberal democracy satellite nation, as a buffer against the USSR. But all of the horrors of communism in Poland, you could potentially, at some probabilistic level, blame on this one spy that was in FDR's cabinet.
Wow.
So Truman, this is from 46 to 53, right? Or sorry, 45 to 53. Truman blocked the investigations of many ways and actively stopped the FBI from looking into certain things. He also shut down the Venona project at some point, even though J. Edgar Hoover, the wild child that he was, actually did portions of the Venona project in secret behind Truman's back. So Truman was actually, J. Edgar Hoover in some ways you could say was committing treason against Truman, but he was doing it because he knew that we needed to decrypt what the Russians were communications were. And I don't care if the president's going to stop me. I'm going to keep a skeleton crew and keep working.
Now, do you think Truman was just like a rube, that he just didn't think that this was all a serious problem, or do you think that there's a lot of that?
I don't know. There's a lot of reports that Truman was very sick in his presidency and that he was kind of losing it. And in his last year of his presidency, that basically his wife ran the country, that he didn't even run the country, that he was bedridden, and they were just lying to everybody about the fact that he was out of it.
Isn't that Woodrow Wilson?
That is Woodrow Wilson. I'm sorry, but he was sick. You're right. That's Woodrow Wilson. He was in a similar position, though, where he was really sick. But you're right. I mixed him up with Woodrow Wilson. See, this is Mark. This is why I have a co-host. I say something dumb, and then he goes, wait a minute. That's not right. Fucking having a co-host is great if you can find a quiet co-host.
Also, that's my wife. She's not quiet. But she tells me I'm dumb.
Yeah, he'll do it. See, keep me honest. But he locked the FBI out of, not the FBI so much, right? He told him to shut down the Venona project, that it was a waste. They kind of kept it up. They kept a skeleton crew. But the important thing though, right, is that he locked Congress from the information for all the investigations into communist spies that the FBI was doing. But you see, the thing is that the FBI can't prosecute people. So the only people the FBI can go to with these investigations is the State Department and the DOD and the DOJ and the president. And the president is ignoring them, and the State Department is full of communist spies.
Wow. Yeah.
So and Congress has no idea what's going on.
Right.
Because it's all sealed from them. In 1949, McCarthy supposedly receives a report of communist infiltration of the State Department. This is the list that he shows in his speech to Congress. He's like, I've got the names, right? I've got these 110 people right here. These are communist spies, yada, 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 right? But it's being corroborated by J.B. Matthews, and it's being corroborated by the former Secretary of the Navy in some degree, and he's hearing other things, and we don't know what other sources of information he has. But it's the impetus. This is the document that in some ways is the impetus towards investigation, but it's not until Alger Hiss's prosecution for perjury that he's like, something has to be fucking done now. In June of 1947, so this is again 3 years before McCarthy. Everything I've said thus far is occurring before McCarthy ever gets involved. Right. So when you hear, he was a lone whack job that just inserted himself because of the Red Scare, lies, pure lies.
Right.
Yeah. In 1947, in June, a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee sends a memorandum claiming that there are security risks of homosexuals and communists in the State Department. Now, why are homosexuals a risk? Not because they're fucking gay. Nobody cares about that. But it makes them incredibly vulnerable to bribery.
Right.
Because it's illegal to be a homosexual at the time. You can literally go to jail in 1947 for having homosexual relationships. And so they're like, hey, we've got security risks. Right. Now, in June 24th, Assistant Secretary of State John Purfoy fires 10 people from the State Department, and 5 of those people are on that list from the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee. Okay, so there's already public records that the Senate are aware of that, I'm sorry, what? There was communist spies in the State Department and they got fired, right? So there's more kind of mounding evidence that there's a problem here. Okay. However, after this, unlike hundreds of other organizations, remember how I said 2,500 people were fired under that executive order, right? Every government agency has hundreds of people being fired in some regards because of the Red Scare or whatever, if you will, right? But because many of them aren't fit to be in the government because they were members of the Communist Party or because they had vulnerability or security issues. Hilariously enough, though, in the State Department from 1947 and 1950, no one was fired. Every other government agency has 50 people here, 70 people here over this couple year period where they're cleaning up their departments and getting rid of spies. But most of them aren't spies. They're just people with associations with the Communist Party and shit, right? Mm-hmm. The State Department doesn't fire a single fucking person. Not one. They magically didn't find one person at a time where all these other government agencies are. It's suspicious, but...
Yeah, something... Right. It doesn't add up, right? Something...
Right. In 1949, Alger Hiss, who is basically, I believe at the time is the second in command of the State Department, is found guilty of perjury. We will talk about this a little bit more later, but basically it was discovered through documentation that he was absolutely a communist spy, but he was past the statute of limitations on the evidence. Thus, he was committed of perjury for lying. Technically, he was committed of perjury in his libel case against the person that made the accusations, but the American public is now aware, right, in 1949, that the State Department has been infiltrated by communist spies as early as the 1930s.
Wow. Yeah.
And then, of course, again, just to reiterate, 1950, America discovered spies gave the Soviets the bomb.
And this is, again, just a reminder, this is all leading into McCarthy.
This is all leading into McCarthy. Right. Well, except for the bomb thing, technically speaking. Right. That's early in McCarthyism, but the act happened before. Right. But us being all aware of it happens later. So next, Amerasia. Amerasia was a communist propagandist journal that exists in America. I don't say that lightly. Its number one person that was funding it was Frederick Field, who was a known Soviet propagandist from Moscow, and it was their number one donor. It was basically a journal that was pro-communist, and that wrote pro-communist pieces all the time, and it focused on Asia, so Korea, China, Japan, right? And so, of course, it was like the communists are wonderful, the nationalists are evil and they're killing children. And, the communists are the only people willing to fight against the Japanese during World War II. And the communists are all great, right? Well, Amerasia was raided by the FBI in 1945. So again, 5 years before McCarthy. And what they discovered was that a State Department official, John Service, right, had passed over thousands of documents, many of which were classified and top secret documents, to this propagandist journalist outlet that was funded by Moscow. So the DOJ, they're like, the FBI, they're like, we've got an open and shut case. Dude's got his signatures all on it. We've got communications between them. We've got mail. We've got exchange of money. Perfect fucking case of the State Department leaking classified and top secret documents about what we're doing in the East Asian world to propagandize and use that to like be one or two steps ahead of like what the American State Department is planning on doing. Well, for whatever reason, the DOJ gave Amerasia a bunch of fines and then said John Service can go back to work in the State Department.
Wow.
We don't know why.
Wow.
We don't know why. We don't. Is there corruption in the DOJ at this point? We don't know. We just know that they got a slap on the wrist, and despite this man clearly doing like high treason, giving classified documents to Russian-funded propagandist firms, like this isn't a whistleblower. They're secretly hoarding these. And this, again, the book Stan Evans' Blacklisted by History does an amazing job of like showing all of these things that led up to McCarthy. And the reason the term blacklisted is if you've heard about the blacklists in Hollywood and stuff like that, yeah. That's the inspiration by the title is Joseph McCarthy was blacklisted by history.
Right. What he's accused of is literally what was done to him, basically.
Yes. Yeah, basically, unpersoned. So, the next thing we want to talk about real quick before we get into McCarthy himself, China and our spies. So, at this time, at least 50 million people have died, right? 76 million is another estimate. Some people go as much as 200 million. But in the Eastern conflict, up until his death, it's at least 50 million people. Okay? State Department Ambassador William D. Pauley was interviewed later, like by HUAC and by McCarthy and everything. And when asked about, do you think that there was communist that like you could have rid the communist spies without this? He said, no, I don't. Do you think China would have fallen to the communists if it wasn't full of spies? No, I don't. Right? You have individuals that are, ambassador for the State Department saying, I honestly believe that if we hadn't had all of these communist spies, basically that China would be a liberal democracy and Mao's Great Leap Forward never would have occurred, and North Korea would probably be a liberal democracy too.
Right. Then so like I can see where you would sympathize with sort of James Lindsay, where he's coming from, where he's saying McCarthy's a hero, he didn't go do enough. Right? Because the argument would be not only was he doing the right thing, but had we not hampered him, then possibly.
Well, he came after, right? Like we would have had to have rooted them out in the 30s.
Oh, okay, I got you. Right, I got you. Okay. Right,
you know what I mean? Like he's just trying to stop the damage from getting worse. Now, Dexter. Right. So we had allied until 1946, until Truman, with Chiang Kai-shek. Now, Chiang Kai-shek was the nationalists that were fighting the communists in China. We were giving them aid. We were giving them intelligence. We were doing everything we could to help the nationalists fight the communists. And the communists were being funded by the Russians, right? So it was a proxy war. China was a proxy war between the United States and between Russia, between Christianity and atheism, and between communism and democracy, if you will. And I hate most of those things. But nevertheless, right? However, George Marshall, another State Department guy, he removed aid to the nationalists to help the communists. Another spy, argued for getting rid of all of the aid to these nationalists. The State Department fought tooth and nail to stop funding and stop sharing information. Dexter White, remember that guy, the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury? He blocked $200 million in gold in the year 1946. I didn't do the math on how much that is today, but it's a lot of fucking money, right? That would have allowed them to keep fighting the communists in China. Okay, he blocked it personally. He made sure that those shipments never came through and that they were requisitioned and put back into our own coffers and in other areas. Basically, money laundering in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Thanks for the follow, guys. I know I'm not really engaging with chat that much. Have fun with Raffle. He's a bot that shows up randomly. I ban him and then he just comes back on another name. It's somebody attacks me with this bot. I don't know why. It's just like a word association bot and it goes wild. So, last one. Solomon Adler worked with Dexter White from China. So this is another communist spy that was a State Department individual that worked in China. And his job was to tailor reports back to the State Department in America to make it seem like the Chinese communists weren't that bad, that they weren't really communists, that the nationalists were these horrible people, and that getting involved in this war at all would be a bad idea. And like, by the way, the Chi-Coms, like they helped fight against the Japanese, and the nationalists never would do that. Right. And so it's massive amounts of propaganda. Of course, he had a handler, reports and stop aid to Chiang, right? Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalist. He had a handler, Chi Chao-ting, who lived with him. He literally lived with Communist Party officials in his apartment and nobody like even checked up on that. So he's literally living with communist like handler and like people are just like, oh, fucking Solomon Adler says stuff's good to go. It must be good to go. Lastly, just before all of this kicks off, okay, there comes the Lattimore proposal. The Lattimore proposal was the next stage of the State Department's infiltration, which was to abandon South Korea and Korea. In 1949, right, this is the same day that Alger Hiss is charged and is convicted of perjury. He gives a speech supporting the Lattimore proposal. The State Department is basically saying, stay out of Korea. There's no reason for us to be in Korea. Let Korea fall to the communists. That's not our fight. That's not our war. Like, we shouldn't be involved in that at all. Like, it's just going to be a shit show and nothing good will ever come from it. If this hadn't kicked off, it's also very likely that we wouldn't have been involved in the Korean War and that North Korea and South Korea would be the same country. It would all just be North Korea. Okay? So 1949, Dean Acheson gives that speech the same day as Alger Hiss. And then 2 weeks after that is when we have the Wheeling speech in February of 1950. So with the exception of like us learning about the nukes, everything I have said until not just now all occurred and was known by some, or some of which was known by the public, like the Amera Asia, like the Alger Hiss, like, the FBI, these things were known to the public, and that the government knew a ton of other things, such as the subcommittee in 1947. All of these things occur before McCarthy ever sets foot in West Virginia to give a speech against, to give the Wheeling speech. So, I mean, I figure this now's the time for a little bit of a break before I continue with the presentation. You want to talk about that? Yeah.
So, right. Yes. So here's the questions I had first that I was unaware of, right? So I probably was aware of 20% of what you talked about, but most of the specifics, obviously not.
Right.
One of the big criticisms that I think you hear of McCarthy is I think he's associated with the blacklist, with Hollywood and things of that.
Yeah, he's not.
You're saying definitively he had nothing to do. But can I ask you separately, were you opposed to that sort of blacklist type thing when it came to non-governmental entities such as Hollywood?
It depends on for me personally as a libertarian, it depends on the situation, right? So, I mean, if you're going to have a state and you have state infiltrate, right? And they have a monopoly on power and violence, right? And you have state infiltrators infiltrating Hollywood with massive amounts of funds and like buying off things. I don't know how my principles would go on that. I would err very heavily on the side of we should call it out. We should inform. We should educate. but that there should be no state usage of any fines or anything like that.
That's my feeling on it, that it's not a problem with the state investigating and informing the public, but I wouldn't want the state to use force to stop it, right? And I feel that way about a lot of issues even today, where you should be allowed to have whatever kind of crazy belief you want as long as you're not harming people. But and it's not
but see, the problem is that has been lied about a lot too, right? We're not talking about Hollywood and like the blacklist and stuff. But I mean, like, there were communist infiltrators that were paid spies that were starting strikes and like violent strikes and things like that, that were attacking businesses and things like that. There was legitimate harm done by foreign spies that were paying people to incite violence and unrest and economic damage. You know what I mean? That, like, I think could constitute some form of punishment, but I would err very heavily on the side of caution for things like that.
Yeah, and I agree. And one of the things I'll say about this as well is, and I'd be interested to see if you agree with me. I always find it funny. This is going to seem unrelated, but I think it is. Do you ever listen to like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, right, where you hear all these people celebrating themselves, right?
And and just joking, patting themselves on the back, like,
right, and they're like,
drone strikes.
We are the last bastion of hope between the people and holding truth to power. And the irony is, they're sort of right. Except it's not them. But the free press is important for that reason. And I think knowing, and like, if you could speak on this for a second, as this is occurring, it's not just that like the AmeriAsia and other groups like that. There's also mainstream media outlets that are basically sympathetic to the Soviets and cultural out, not just Hollywood, right? And so the idea that I would think that you have sort of you have like a step of when you want the government to act, right? And so the first step to me is not the government impaneling a commission to look into communism in Hollywood. The first step would be that we should have a media that's sort of intrepid and is looking into this stuff and reporting it, and then the people would know without the government ever having to get involved. But sadly, at least today, we don't have that. Was there a lot of independent media back then, or any, that was sort of calling this stuff out?
I mean, so you had a lot of articles in journals and, like, you know what I mean? Like magazines, right? Because you got to think back in the day, as a matter of fact, you'd probably have more, not independent. Independent's not the right word, because independent media really doesn't exist at all at this time, right? Because the technology didn't really like allow for it in the way that the internet has, right? Like, I think when people hear the word independent media, they think about people like you and me, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't really exist to much of a degree. Some people in like a certain college radio or something, but for the most part, they're companies, right? That being said, you had a pretty large diverse groupings of media, both communist propaganda, major media, and things like that, because so many people were more avid readers of magazines and subscriptions and newspapers and like local papers and things like that, right? Like, this is an era where people, the middle class, so far as they exist, have multiple magazine subscriptions. And there are writers that like write pieces for, good home living, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's a, like, you know what I mean? It's a different era in terms of our media consumption. But yeah, there were definitely people that were on both sides of the fence of like HUAC and the communists. And like, you had like, groups being formed that were crying civil liberties violations. And many Americans were, sympathetic to that, right? Like this, the government is attacking like actors and film directors and things for having political opinions that I don't agree with, but this is kind of wrong, right? So, I mean, like, yeah, but you also had other people like, another day in the victory for democracy and Christianity, you know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot of back and forth on that. But the major media institutions that were like super well respected, most of them had a lot of communist sympathies, even if they weren't like infiltrated.
Right. So I'll just say this before we move on. This is the last thing I'll say before we move on. I thought that if I would, like I told you, I was probably going to agree with 95% of what you said. I'm fully admitting, just so everyone's listening here, I'm coming at this from a place of ignorance, right? So I'm hearing a lot of
if you want to research it, that's fine. You know what I mean? But it's crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know. Like I think you probably share my belief. No one should ever take what any of us say at face value. You should. It's a good jumping off point, but you should try your best to look in. But what I'm saying beyond that is, like, I thought in my head, I was thinking, well, there are going to be areas of potential disagreement. And the two that I thought that I could come up with was, one, even though I knew that McCarthy wasn't primarily responsible for like the Hollywood stuff, would that be something you would defend? And I think your stance is very similar to mine, so I don't really have a disagreement. And the second potential area of criticizing McCarthy would be, did he accuse a bunch of people that ended up not being what he said, and which I think we'll get into.
We'll get into. To me, he didn't.
Right. And so to me, those are the two. I don't understand. I refuse to accept bad faith people, particularly on the left, that are going to criticize the idea that McCarthy should not have been allowed, or anyone in our government should not have been going after literal spies, given that they want to treat actual Americans like literal spies, like they did with Donald Trump before. So I'm not going to accept that criticism. And so those, to me, it is entirely valid for members of our Senate to root out spies, especially if they're doing so not based on a whim or not based on their feelings, but actual evidence that they're presenting to the American people. But I don't see how
history is written by the victors, and you know, many civil rights organizations and things like that were, you know, let's be honest, they're the authors. Conservatives don't write books. Conservatives don't make art. They're starting to, and they always have to some degree, right? Like obviously, obviously there's some gorgeous pieces of like, you know, Eastern Orthodox iconography and shit, right? Like, don't get me wrong, but like when it comes to like the production of art and media, it is overwhelmingly left wing, and that's not because it's necessarily captured by the left so much as it's about personality differences. Conservatives tend to be the type of that like hierarchical structures. They like to have a good job, and they like to make sure that they save a certain amount of money so that they can go on vacation, so they can give their children better opportunities, right? So that their kids can be dumb lefties that waste all their fucking money in college, right?
Yeah. So that's where, and so because, you know, and again, the last thing I'll say, because I definitely want to get through it all, the like haha joke, what people will say to you, these brain dead people that just want to like look at things in the most shallow of ways, they'll say, Scott's a libertarian, and here he is cheering for the government out there, rooting in people's personal lives, saying that you can't have political disagreements and we need to call you out and shame you. And that's nothing like the way you're describing it. It wasn't talking about people outside of the government. McCarthy wasn't. It wasn't just talking about a disagreement on economic philosophy. This is literally people, we were in a war, nuclear weapons were being stolen, like the world was, and it's something that even I can't really wrap my head around. Like,
well, I think the biggest figure is, you know, knowing that in a few years the world went from 90% either third world or liberal democracy to 55% communist.
Right, and it's difficult for, and we might be seeing this in the future. It is difficult for people that are born when we were born to imagine a bipolar world. The U.S. has been the hegemon for so long. When we look at perceived enemies, it's always them from an incredible position of weakness. Like every single time.
I do want to point out one thing that is not in my presentation. Mark brings up a good point, all right? He was a little bit involved with a lot of his rhetoric, not in his government action, but in his rhetoric in like the Lavender Scare, right? Like he was pretty anti-homosexual, thought that gay people were like a threat, and that like they were evil, and like he said some pretty spicy things through his life, but that's not important, I think, to the tale of McCarthyism so much as that is a product of his times and his bad beliefs that were very common at the time, which is 1950s and the way that they viewed gays. Like up until Stonewall's 69, 73 is where gay people are burned alive in a gay bar, and the police watch in New Orleans, right? Like your parents were alive when they were burning gay people alive and like doing nothing about it. So 20 years before that, a guy having some spicy fucking evil shit to say about gay people is like just kind of a product of his time and not really important to the McCarthyism shit that's going on. But it is worth mentioning that McCarthy's not a saint.
Right, and that's fair, right?
And Mark brought it up last time, and I was like, oh, I didn't want to get into that, but like, yeah.
Well, and it's fair, right? Like, and very few figures in history or even contemporaneously are saints. Like, all of I'm a shitty person, I'll admit, like, right? But the question is, the central idea that we're talking about with McCarthyism is sort of the idea of, was his Red Scare, as they term it, legitimate? And from so far what we're seeing, that regardless if you think he went about it in the appropriate way, the lead up to it is absolutely the fear was real. Absolutely there was infiltration and it was targeted to that. But I did have someone in my chat say that the two criticisms, I'll just tell you what the people said in the chat. One, the person saying that this homophobia directly led to a senator committing suicide. I have things to say on that. I don't know.
I mean, like, you can't prove that.
Well, even if you could, like, it's like, what sort of rhetoric is that? That would be the equivalent of saying, like, well, what if Marjorie Taylor Greene commits suicide tomorrow because the anti-Trump rhetoric, right? Or the fact that the DOJ just put out that having the Gadsden flag means you're a potential domestic
No, I think
terrorist, right?
I mean, I brought it up because it's a legitimate criticism, right? Is that, like, that these people in this time had horrible ideas about sexuality based off of, their upbringing and their fundamentalist Christian views and perspective, and they said and did a lot of horrible things, but that and that we should be able to separate the art from the artist here a little bit, and we should recognize that in many ways this man was a hero, and many of the things that he did were good, and he's been misaligned for them. If you want to talk about how those things are wrong, yeah, they're wrong, and I'm not going to have any argument from you whatsoever.
And that's what I'm saying. You always have to be careful when you blame someone for someone else's suicide. Because, for example, I say bad shit about people. I criticize the FBI left and right now. If an FBI member, because I say terrible things about their office, commits suicide, I don't know that it's fair to say that I caused that. And even if I say something heinous, like even today, if you have someone, if I'm debating Richard Spencer and Richard Spencer says a bunch of bad things about Jewish people and a Jewish person commits suicide, I don't know that you could draw a straight line saying, oh, that's because Richard Spencer. But I'm not defending, I'm just scratching the surface of his potential homophobia. I'm not defending any of that whatsoever. I would deplore it, right? But I'm just saying, I don't know that we evaluate, well, someone then killed themselves because of this homophobia. I just don't know how to evaluate that. The other thing that
technically speaking, the former Secretary of the Navy also presumably killed himself because of all of the actions that were happening against McCarthyism in the media. If you believe the official narrative that he killed himself, I don't. But if you do believe that official narrative, then we can just engage in that whataboutism. What about the man who killed himself because of all of the attacks for what they were trying to do that was righteous?
Right. So, I mean, it's interesting. The other point I promised I would ask him, he's basically making the point that although you may be correct in the lead up that this was a serious issue, that it wasn't the role of a senator to do something, that maybe the FBI or someone, and instead the fiery public speeches were detrimental to the sort of ability for
so we'll get into
efforts to root it out.
We'll get in that a little bit better when we dispel some more myths, because that's based off of a little bit of a mythology of what actually happened. But like, I agree with you, which is why I said it's very important to recognize that Truman stopped Congress from being able to look into these things, and that J. Edgar Hoover was investigating these people. And and we'll get into more evidence that the FBI had. The FBI had everything they needed to go after these people, and they attempted to, and it fell on deaf ears. That's why Congress got involved, was because nothing was happening. When the number 2 guy in the Department of the Treasury is a communist spy, and the FBI, the director of the FBI tells the president on more than one occasion, Dexter White's a spy and we have proof. And then they go, shut up, sounds like a fairy tale. What are you supposed to do? The next best thing that can be done is that Congress, both Senate and the House, have to step up and expose it and make these people known publicly so that they can be fired and brought out. And also the idea that these people's lives were ruined, we'll also look into that mythology a little bit too.
Okay, and I'll just say this, it's clearly not outside the scope of it, right? So I don't think anyone would argue. You could say, well, they technically legally were allowed to do what they did, but should they have been strategically, is that the correct body? And
the right answer would have been the DOJ should have fucking worked with the FBI, but they weren't.
So looking contemporaneously, the situation I would put it in, like we had a corrupt FBI that used unverified opposition research to spy on Trump. There are agencies that should be looking at that, right? That there should be the inspector general, there should be a special counsel, like the executive branch is in charge of that. These are the sort of people, particularly Bill Barr, Jeff Sessions, should have been looking into this, but they didn't. So someone in Congress like Devin Nunes, like stepping up to the plate going, the American people need to know what happened here. It's the same issue. 30 years from now, someone might say, well, technically Devin Nunes was right, but wasn't there a better body to do this? That wasn't a, yeah, but those bodies weren't doing it.
Right.
So someone who it was within their scope, which it clearly was with Nunes, and it seems that it was with McCarthy. What would you ask him to do?
The answer is this. Here's the answer. I don't give a fuck about it because I'm an anarchist. I only give a fuck about it. Listen, I only give a fuck about it practically in the current system that we have. But isn't this kind of the point of checks and balances? Is that when some other institution is corrupt and not working, another branch of government steps in to fix the problem? Right. That's what's occurring with McCarthyism. Is the executive is not fixing this problem, so the legislative branch steps in.
Right, and
in their capacity to fix it.
The only way I would be persuaded by that sort of argument is if there was a constitutional reason that McCarthy did not have a legal right to do what he did, which clearly isn't the case. And so I find it difficult to be persuaded. And on that's a can of worms. I'll leave that go.
Well, you want to continue?
Yeah, I'll just say this. I get sick and tired of people saying, well, when no one speaks up, when finally someone does speak up, we need to judge them for all these moral foibles. And this might be super controversial. Maybe you'll disagree with me. I find it very similar to in the UK, how Tommy Robinson gets shit on all the time. And you're right. He
who shall not be named. Yeah.
Right. Like he says some really horrible things that I disagreed with, but for God's sakes, no one else is speaking up. Right. Yeah. And so it's like, at least, yeah, you're right. Someone better had been more judicious and spoke better than him. But at some point, don't we say, well, you got to give him credit for at least having the nerve to say something despite great physical harm to himself. So I'm not persuaded by this, not the right person to do it message. If no one else is doing it, thank goodness someone stepped up and tried to take care of it.
Man, I would hate to be in Rob Noerr's chat and disagree with him, because I thought I was bad about hounding my chat when they say something I disagree with. But Rob Noerr will fucking burn you in his chat. If he doesn't like what you said, he has no problem with the power imbalance. Like, fuck you. I'm the streamer here, and I'm going to prove you fucking wrong in like 4 paragraphs. Like, I mean, good on you. I'm just everybody's got their own style, their own community. But I was just like, God damn, man. Like, this poor guy came in here and he's fucking burning his ass.
It is something that I actually get, because the downside to that, the easiest downside is trolls. I have a proclivity. There could be 100 people watching me, and 99 people could be like, I agree with everything you say, Rob, and I'll barely address them. But the one person that's like, you're a shithead, I'm like, hey.
Dude, I have the same problem. I'm like, fuck you. And Mark will be like, it's good, dude. Like, move on. We have content to do. And I'm just like, this is the content. Like, proving bruv what wrong is the content. Bruv What's the only person.
It's a special case.
Bruv What is the only person we've ever banned from our chat just for being annoying and over the top and not shutting the fuck up.
But like, seriously though, again, not to belabor the point, but it's like, if I'm an audience member, I actually like that. If the content is, even if the content provider's arguing against me, at least they're interacting, right? But if I go on Hassan's stream, all they'll do is ignore me and ban me if I say that, I disagree for X, Y, Z.
So let's get into actual McCarthy. Oh, sorry, I had one more slide that probably would have been a better time to stop, but it is what it is, because then it gets into McCarthy. I forgot about this. So before McCarthy, nothing happened. That's really important to stress. In 1939, Whittaker Chambers reported Alger Hiss. Okay, this is 11 years before. Hiss was then promoted and made Secretary General of the United Nations. Okay?
Wow. That's unreal.
Yeah. That's what happened after he was reported for being a communist spy. Whittaker Chambers is a special case. He's another individual of a reformed communist. He reports them, and we'll go more into that story later, because I have a whole slide or two on Whittaker Chambers alone. In 1945 and in 1946, J. Edgar Hoover named Dexter White as a spy. This wasn't just, hey, there's a document somewhere. This was Elizabeth Bentley corroborating it. This was the Venona Project and the Venona Project didn't corroborate this yet, but it did later. This was other reports and investigations. So we'll get into Elizabeth Bentley as well. So we have a slide on her. Fucking great hero that nobody knows. Instead, Chambers himself was heavily investigated, and he had to take documents as blackmail against Alger Hiss to protect himself, because now he's got the commie spies mad at him, and he's got the State Department mad at him and trying to find dirt on him. And then, of course, I mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning. In 1949, John F. Kennedy gave speeches as a congressman, as a freshman congressman, warning the dangers of communist infiltration of the Roosevelt administration. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. So there was a ton of information that a lot of people had that our State Department, at the very least, was heavily infiltrated by known communist spies. And it gets worse. But we needed McCarthy. Like, McCarthy could not have not happened. Without McCarthy, none of this gets fixed. Mm-hmm. So, McCarthy begins. This is his wheeling speech. I'm just going to post it. Let me just post this in chat. I read it the other night. If you want to hear me recite and read it, then go check it out on YouTube. So we're gonna move on. McCarthy begins his fight until 1957, when he dies, hounded by the media. He's constantly censured in the Senate. Everybody's coming after him. His colleagues have basically distanced themselves from him. He's under constant investigation. He has a problem with alcoholism. He dies in Bethesda Hospital. No autopsy is ever done to determine cause of death. He went into the hospital, presumably somewhat healthy with some heart issues, left the hospital dead. And it's the same hospital as Forstall, where he committed suicide. Moving forward, James Forstall. James Forstall was the Secretary of the Navy. And James Forstall is probably one of the biggest reasons why the military was able to maintain its power, despite the State Department and a lot of communist spies in our government doing everything they could to push Truman to reduce our military funding and to reduce the size of our military. James Forstall was like, fuck you, communism's a problem. And he was really vigilant, and he basically he constantly had people looking into other people, kind of Red Scare a little bit, but he ran a tight ship, pun intended, the entire time he was in. And he spoke publicly about the threat of communism within our government, but it was all kind of flowery language without enough substance to back up any of this shit. He was kind of like a wild guy that would just kind of go off and be like, there's fucking communists. And they're like, fucking where? You're the Secretary of the Navy. Shut the fuck up. You're not supposed to be saying this shit, right? But he was friends with Joseph McCarthy towards the end. They knew each other. They spoke to each other. They had dinner with each other. Okay. There's this myth that McCarthy was this wild guy going out alone, but he had a lot of supporters and a lot of people. This was one of them. Kind of the Alex Jones of the day and the Secretary of the Navy. You know what I mean? He's just I know that they're there. And then they're like, well, fucking back it up, dude. So he kept fighting and fighting. Eventually the media called him a homosexual, said that he cheated on his wife, said that he was laundering money, typical shit, until eventually he was asked to resign as Secretary of the Navy. He ends up divorcing his wife or separating, sorry, not divorcing, checks himself into a mental institution, okay, at Bethesda Hospital. Checks himself and says, I'm not feeling great. I'm going crazy. I think the communists are coming after me. I'm going to check myself in. He was only there for a couple of weeks when he mysteriously falls from a window on the 16th floor from a mental institution window where most of them are barred unless he gets keys into a different room with a different window. Somehow he stole keys in the mental institution from someone, got into an area he wasn't supposed to be into, and then jumped out of the window from the 16th floor and committed suicide in the same hospital that Joseph McCarthy died in.
Wow.
It sounds like foul play, but it's probably just a coincidence, to be honest, right? There's not enough evidence to say it happened, but it is a nice little coinky-dink. People that are speaking out about
movie.
Yeah, it would make a great movie. McCarthy movie needs to be done. I said last time we gotta get the Daily Wire to make a fucking McCarthy movie. That would be a banger of a fucking movie. If the Daily Wire did a McCarthy movie and just made him out to be the fucking hero he was.
Ben Shapiro could be Roy Cohn.
Ben Shapiro could be Roy Cohn, like not even joking. Like they look like they're similar. But one of his favorite things that he said to McCarthy, like as a friend, and it's something that like I think should stick with you as a conservative or a libertarian, is he said to him when McCarthy was trying to figure out like, is it really what's going on? Like before he really like began full swing into his investigations, he said, quote, "If they were merely stupid, they would sometimes make a mistake in our favor."
That resonates so much with me because the one argument that I find to be the most tedious is I'm sick and tired of when I point out corruption, having people say, well, it was just incompetence. Like, let me give you an example. I'm supposed to believe that top members of the FBI manufacturing evidence to say the opposite of the truth in order to get a warrant to spy on the president. Well, they just didn't know. They didn't know you weren't supposed to do that. It was just incompetence. And that's absolutely true, that if it was just stupidity,
or
then you would
today,
say
a couple days ago, you got a warrant that was the scope of which was to get every single solitary document from Trump that ever occurred during his presidency. Like, that's like a magic warrant that like regular cops don't get on drug dealers.
It's so funny. Like, just a brief aside on that. I was arguing with people on that on Twitter. And for those that don't know, if you go to Appendix B, subsection C, it literally requests the affidavit is for seizing every document that was Trump had during his presidency. They're literally talking about cocktail napkins that he wrote on, pictures that he took, everything, right? And so when I bring this up, this is the response someone had. They were like, no. If you go up and you read the top, it's only those things that meet the violation of the three standards that they outline, the three statutes that they outline. But I said, that's not true. But if that's going to be the left's defense of this, then surely you'll be outraged when you find out they took cocktail napkins and photos, because you'll say, oh, well, that doesn't meet the statute, right? But
it'll be an ever-moving goalpost.
That's right. And so what they'll say is like, no, this doesn't mean everything. And when you're like, cocktail napkin? Oh yeah, that's included. Well, if cocktail napkin's included, so is everything, you moron. So
right.
Yeah, you're right though. This quote's very, apropos for today, where it's like,
James Forstall quote. You should always remember that. It's like, okay, well, the government's incompetent, blah, blah, which is something we hear from libertarians more often than conservatives. Libertarians are, because the government is fucking incompetent. But if it was merely incompetence or merely stupidity, they would make mistakes that worked for us.
Me and Casimir had this conversation the other day after a panel we were on the Crucible where, I was arguing with J.Y. Lewis, who was on there, that was like, oh, it's all incompetence by the government. And I was like, no, it's intentional. Now, Casimir's point is it's both, which it is. He's absolutely right. There is incompetence. But certainly most of these things, like I'll just give the easiest example I can. Do you think that the government really didn't know that forcing nursing homes to accept COVID patients would lead to nursing home deaths? You think they didn't know that? That was our bad. We didn't know. Yeah, so I mean that's intentional.
I'll go 10 steps further and say that the government knew that redefining what efficacy means on vaccinations as whether or not it reduces symptomology, as to whether or not it actually reduces the viral load in the upper respiratory tract, was a recipe that, thank God, didn't happen. But we already knew from early studies that we had ADE, antibody-dependent enhancement, in rats and in other mammals. And we went through what? We went through Delta, we went through Omicron, we went through, like, what are we on now? Like BA.5, right? And like, it's BA.5. That's what Joe Biden got. It's a weaker version of Omicron from the BA.4, right? The thing about the matter is that the vaccines that people are getting are based off of the chain proteins on the outside of the structure of the virus. It's not based off of any antibodies off of the membrane lipid layer. It's not based off of the N proteins. It's not based off of like 7 other parts that natural immunity confers. And by associating itself with the most easily changeable thing in terms of evolution of a virus, what easily could have happened, and thank God it didn't happen, was that individuals that were vaccinated against those chains on the outside of the virus could have actually taken a vaccine, and once it evolved, it actually could have made it to where it intentionally made the virus more likely to infect, because instead of conferring protection, it could have actually made it get into the membrane tissue of organs easier. And if that virus had mutated in a way that we didn't like, because it wasn't a sterilizing vaccine, we could have created a situation where the new virus didn't hardly do anything to people that weren't vaccinated or people that had natural immunity, but to people who only had vaccine protection would have died in astronomical numbers. And they knew that.
Happened, right?
They knew that. I knew that because I know how to fucking read the science, because I was a medic and I know how to read research studies.
There is a study I read.
They didn't give a fuck.
It's called Merrick's disease. I think that's the word. I have it right. And basically, I could be wrong about the name of this, but basically it was this, it was infecting chickens, and the lethality of Merrick's disease was something like 2% or something.
Right.
But still, if you're raising thousands of chickens, that's a big deal. And so they started to vaccinate these chickens. And in a similar situation to what you're saying, what occurred was they called it a leaky vaccine. That what it did was it offered initial protection, but it encouraged the mutation of the virus. And only the chickens that were vaccinated then became 90% susceptible to death when they contracted the disease. Mm-hmm. So it didn't make it more infectious, but it made it more lethal. And the birds that weren't vaccinated were still fine. The mutated disease was not affecting them. And the idea was basically similar to what you're saying. The actual vaccination, the way it was implied, because it was on the surface level, I don't understand. Yeah. You know more about the
it's what you're talking about is antibody dependent enhancement, right? Which is basically the virus mutates, right? And you have a partial immunity granted via the vaccine to a specific structure of the virus. And what happens is that structure changes in the mutation, so you no longer are afforded any levels of protection. And in fact, the vaccine and the antibodies actually, because they've been trained by a vaccine and not a natural infection, what occurs is when this virus comes in, the antibodies don't attack it at all. They don't because it's only looking at those protein connections on the outside of the virus, and it's not looking at the other structures of the virus. And so because of that, it facilitates the infection, makes the infection worse once you catch it.
And just
luckily that didn't happen. Luckily, it didn't happen. I was arguing like a year ago, like, you motherfuckers don't know what you could be doing.
Right. And the beauty of it is, like, a lot of this is complicated. So just to make it simple, given that unlike what you hear in the media, there are multiple sides to these issues, the moral position and the correct position was to say, you could take the drug if you want, but it's immoral to force it on anyone.
Absolutely.
Because, and what I said over and over again is like, and it didn't happen the way you said, but in many ways, like, I have a whole presentation where we can see, using CDC numbers and a few other studies, that people that had previous infection, in a study that looked at over 1.6 million, forcing those people to take the vaccine did almost statistically nothing to stop them from catching or from being hospitalized from COVID. Mm-hmm. But their chances of having serious side effects, including anaphylactic shock, were 10 times higher than their chance of being hospitalized with COVID. Yep. And so I said, what will you say? Here's the difference. I think
it's turning into a COVID stream.
I know. I'll just say, like, real quick, like,
I promise I won't comment after.
We could say what we want, right, about this, but both of us are going to say, but make your own choice, right? So morally, how could you hold us accountable? But if you were someone saying, I demand that the government force people to do X, and it turns out that harmed them, how do you live with yourself? How do you live with yourself knowing that through the force of violence, you force people to do something that was bad for them?
I'll just say this. Here's my prediction, all right? You can take this to the bank, boys. And by take this to the bank, I mean it's worth almost nothing. Just like the US dollar.
Right, fiat. So
yeah, you got it. Take this to the bank. I guarantee you, I know exactly. I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen. They're going to keep easing restrictions. They're going to keep pretending like this didn't happen. They're going to try and let this shit fade away. And then one day, a Hollywood actress's child is going to die from a vaccine. And then all of a sudden it'll be like, we didn't know. Like all of a sudden it'll be a problem then when like fucking, when fucking like whatever fucking famous actress, right, has a kid that dies from a vaccine injury, dies. And it's like just provably a vaccine injury and there's no way around it. And she's just like, this is unacceptable. Like, and she just gets red pilled on this one issue out of nowhere because her kid's dead. All of a sudden America will be like, oh, we had no idea. There were no warning signs. That's my prediction how all of this will end.
But all right, I'll shut up now.
All right. I got the audio from like a raid siren going on because we just got a raid. Thank you so much for the raid, boys. And then we'll continue on. So that's James Forstall, Secretary of the Navy. Now let's look at Whittaker Chambers. This is where shit gets interesting. Now, Whittaker Chambers left the Communist Party in 1938. He was a devout communist, and he worked as a spy under Alger Hiss. He worked with Alger Hiss, who was, mind you, the second guy at the State Department. The FBI warned Truman that he was a spy, and so what he did is made him the Secretary General of the United Nations. Anyways, he worked as a spy. And he saw, and he was a devout communist, right? Like he believed it all. He was like, capitalism's evil and all this shit, right? And then what happened was he saw the horrors of communism being leaked out by, what was happening under the Stalin, right? He saw, the gulags and, the road to Wigan Pier and like the messages and, all of these things that are coming out like, holy shit, this is awful, right? He changed his tune. Well, he went to Alger Hiss. And he tried to convince him. He was like, dude, we got to get out. Like, we're on the wrong side of history here. Like, this is not good. Alger Hiss remained a true believer. And basically was like, dude, you're fucking gone and you're done. You're going to fucking disappear. Like, whatever. At least that's what Whittaker Chambers said. He went to the HUAC as well as to McCarthy. He testified for both of them. Now, he saved a bunch of documents. He was like, all right. He grabbed a bunch of fucking original copies and hid them and grabbed them. They became known later as the Pumpkin Patch Papers. We'll talk about them in a minute, but he protects himself. He's like, well, the state, he reports them to the State Department. State Department does nothing. He follows a proper chain of command, and now he's got literal communist spies that want him dead, and the State Department thinks that he's some traitor or whatever because the number two guy is like, this guy's like a bad guy, but he doesn't want to bring attention to himself, but he knows he's got to look over his shoulder at all times. Like, straight up fucking spy movie shit. Steals these documents and hides them. But in 1948, again, 2 years before McCarthy, he testifies before the House Un-American Activities Committee. And he says, Alger Hiss is a communist spy paid by Russia, and I have proof. Okay? Now, he says this publicly. And so Alger Hiss and all his friends that don't know that he's a communist spy, they're like, dude, you got to file a libel lawsuit. And he's like, no, I don't want to file a libel lawsuit. And they're like, you have to file a libel lawsuit. If you don't do anything, it's an admission of guilt, right? So eventually he's like, all right, fuck it. I'll file a libel lawsuit for $75,000. The media goes after Chambers, right? They're like, you're a piece of shit. They said that he was such a bad person and that's why his brother committed suicide years before. Like they attacked his family, his marriage, all this shit. But in 1948, after his testimony, he gets two HUAC investigators and he leads them to the documents. They become known as the Pumpkin Patch Papers because he had water sealed them in water sealed things and hidden them in a carved out pumpkin in a pumpkin patch and leads investigators there and brings out these documents. These documents are signed by Alger Hiss and they're communications between spies in Moscow about top secret State Department secrets that Alger Hiss was leaking to them, as well as it was just one way because he worked as he didn't do the communications into Alger Hiss. He just because he's not his handler, but he did his communications to Moscow, right? They investigate through court, and what they eventually find is that his typewriter was able to be matched to the documents, right? Like basically forensic evidence proved that it was typed on Alger Hiss's typewriter. The most hilarious thing is that Alger Hiss the entire time said, I don't know how he got access to my typewriter, but I admit that those are my signatures. So he was admitting that the handwriting experts were saying that it was him, but wouldn't admit the forensic evidence that showed that it was his typewriter that it was matched to. Fucking
That's unreal. Yeah.
Yes, and this was in Maryland. He took him to that pumpkin patch in Maryland. Like straight up spy movie shit.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Whittaker Chambers was holding on to this for 10 years, looking over his shoulder, scared, until the HUAC came about. And then finally was like, I can go to somebody and the American public can see. This is what ends up happening in 1949 is that Alger Hiss loses his court case. In the libel lawsuit for perjury, he perjures himself by filing the libel lawsuit, saying that he wasn't a communist spy or anything. And then the pumpkin patch papers and the corroboration with those things prove that he was. So he's not able to go to jail for the treason because the treason was past the statute of limitations as far as the criminal prosecution was concerned. Because this was all like all the documents he had were leading up to 1938 and this is 1949. But that happens, and the what is it? The sorry, I forget his name. Dean Acheson is defending him that same day to the National Press Club from the State Department and talking about how they're going to adopt the Lattimore proposal and abandon South Korea as well as China and let it fall to the communists. That's why 2 weeks later, after the Whittaker Chambers thing happens and he wins his case, that's when McCarthy is like, I got to fucking step in. I got enough evidence. It's time to start investigating motherfuckers.
Okay, yeah, so that's the impetus where he gives the first speech that people were like really familiar with, right? Like the speech that you hear broadcast all the time. That's the Wheeling
No,
speech,
that's
right?
not the Wheeling speech. That's the speech from Congress. The Wheeling speech was recorded and there were transcripts in newspapers, but for whatever reason, the recording of it is no longer in the Library of Congress and we don't know where it is. We're not able to find any actual recordings. The one that he gives on the floor is like a couple weeks later. That speech he gives and this is where we get to talking about names and stuff. But we'll do that. We'll talk about that speech a little later. Elizabeth Bentley. Elizabeth Bentley is she's a legit spy. Like all these other guys are assets, right? They're spies in the sense that they're stealing information, right? They're like, giving documents and they're getting paid and they're true believers and all this. But Elizabeth Bentley is a trained Russian spy, right? Like she's like, what's that movie called? Like Blackbird or Ladybird or whatever with the chick from...
Yeah.
Right, like that's who Elizabeth Bentley is.
Red Sparrow.
Red Sparrow. She's a Red Sparrow.
Yeah.
Like she's a trained,
Gotcha.
like basic, like pre-KGB fucking like this is a bad bitch, right? For whatever reason, she has a moment living in America where she has a religious experience and she turns to Christianity. Out of nowhere, she becomes a devout Christian. The moment that she becomes like a couple days after becoming a devout Christian, she goes to the FBI with a list of 87 spies in the State Department.
Wow.
Including Alger Hiss.
That's crazy.
Right. She just found God.
How is this not a movie? I mean, just
Because it goes against the Hollywood narrative of all these
right.
red fuckers.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying this would make an amazing like Daily Wire film.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Mark?
I was just going to comment that Hollywood got to be left in charge of creating their own narrative for 50 years now.
Mm-hmm. Right. So she's a spy, right? And what she also does to corroborate this is that she brings $2,000 in cash. Okay, this is 1945. $2,000 in cash that was given to her by her handler and says, use this and use banking records to track down that I'm getting money from Moscow. Here's my handler. Here's 87 fucking spies in the State Department. And she was later, all of her names, or a majority of her names basically, were confirmed by the Venona papers. We haven't even gotten to the Venona papers. Right. Okay. So that $2,000 is able to track that she's not just some crazy person. And on top of that, she's naming people that the FBI are already looking into and investigating. And it's never in any doubt in the mind to the FBI that she's a legitimate Russian spy turned to our cause by Christ, basically. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Venona documents. A lot of this information, you can check it out if there's a book called The Venona Secrets. I have not read The Venona Secrets. I've only read people talking about the book, and I've read other things and articles about the book. I haven't read it. It's a book I want to read at some point. It's about the documents known as the Venona Project. Sometimes they're called the Moscow transpondence, and sometimes called Venona Papers, etc. So Harvey Clary's a professor at Emory College. He wrote a book called The Venona Secrets. I haven't read it yet. Probably pretty fucking good though. So the project proved unequivocally that Soviets had infiltrated the entire government. And the reason it did that is once these things were fully decrypted, and by fully decrypted, I mean 3% decrypted. Once it showed a ton of the names that were involved, corroborated totally unrenounced transpondence that we had picked up from secret communications of the Russians, showing many that matched the names that were under investigation by the FBI, as well as names that were named by other assets and former communists. Most of the names were corroborated enough to believe that their list of names weren't just like made up names.
Right.
Which again proves what? McCarthy was right.
Right.
So in 1943, the U.S. began decrypting Soviet transmissions. Now, basically, what happened was they used a system where they would have a code, right? And they'd use a different code every day, kind of like the Germans, the Enigma code, but they didn't have like an Enigma machine. They just used different codes. But as the war dragged on, as things happened, they would reuse codes sometimes. And every time they'd reuse a code, it's like, damn, we got your ass. We could figure out both the original first attempt and the second attempt what was said, because we had enough information then to decrypt it. But like if it was a fresh code, we're kind of shit out of luck. There's mathematically you just can't do it, right? Now, 1944, so this is still during World War II, right? Finland from the OSS, Finland's version of the OSS. It's confusing because, and I fucked this up in my presentation, because the precursor to the CIA is the OSS, and Finland's version is also called the OSS, okay? But Finland basically offered to sell the codes to the United States. When I say the codes, what I mean is during the invasion, they had received like 1,500 decrypted documents of Russian communications, which would also give us much more ability to communicate further decryptions, as well as a ton of information on like what the Soviets were doing and what they were communicating and different things like that, right? The Secretary of State and his aide at the time, Alger Hiss, number 2 to the Secretary of State, rejected it. They were like, no, we don't want to do this. They're our allies. If they find out that we're doing this, this could really like, we could lose World War II if like the Russians turn on us. You can't use these codes. But OSS Director Donovan said, go fuck yourself, right? This wild dude was like, fuck you. I'm buying these codes. We're watching everybody. We're the precursor to the CIA. I don't give a fuck. We're looking into everybody. So they get it. And so 3% eventually get decrypted at the end of everything, right? But it includes wiretaps and transmissions between Soviets and US spies. And so, of course, the OSS director is like, fuck you, we're finding these goddamn spies. I don't care if they're our allies or not. Why do they got spies here, right? Now, it showed, the Venona documents showed that there were hundreds of communist spies in academia. There's another thing, if you can find it, I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head because I forgot to put it in here. Not super important, but there are other sources and other things you can look into about how colleges were deeply infected with Soviet spies that went there and lived out their old age into the 70s and 80s as known communist spies within colleges to try and turn academia into a Marxist institution. Now, moving on with the Venona documents. Franklin Delano Roosevelt orders Donovan to return the decryptions to the Soviets and apologize for having them. And he does. He makes some copies, presumably. But regardless, informs the Soviets that we have them and gives them back to Soviet Ambassador Andrei Gromyko. I don't know how to say his fucking name. Gromyko or whatever. It's a Russian thing. I feel like if you just say it in a Russian accent, it like works or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Anything, yeah.
Yeah, but FDR basically orders us to stop investigating and looking into spies in our own country during World War II because they're our allies and we don't want to create problems, and to not look at these fucking decryptions. Truman kept the same policy until 1953 of shutting down the Project Venona, which is what FDR had done. Project Venona was shut down until 1953. Sort of. What basically happened is the beginning of the intelligence community realizing that they can't always trust their president and that they don't give a fuck about following the Constitution. And they were doing it presumably for the right reasons. They kept the project going. They just did it without the consent of Truman, and they did it without informing him about it. But it was more of a skeleton crew. He didn't find out about it. Well, in 1949, a code breaker working in like not necessarily on Project Venona, but working on like a similar thing, decrypted a message proving that the Russians had direct access to all communications between Winston Churchill and President Truman. Wow. They had
that's unreal.
Yeah, that proved that, or maybe not all access, but that they had taps and they had like people infiltrating, and that they knew whatever Truman and Churchill were saying, the Russians knew with their spies network.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy.
Right. The biggest revelation, however, was Dexter White. Remember Dexter White, the guy who founded the International Monetary Fund, or co-founder of the World Bank as well, and wrote the Brentwoods Initiative, and was the Assistant Secretary of Treasury, and also stopped hundreds of millions of funds from being able to go to arm and help the nationalists that were fighting the Chinese communists. Yeah, that guy. He was, the Venona projects proved that he was a spy, and it just proved unequivocally that he was a spy. Worse yet, the project itself was infiltrated by Soviet spies in the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover, but this is a real big problem because we didn't know that it was infiltrated. J. Edgar Hoover was really worried that we couldn't use the Venona project in any type of investigation. We could use it in investigations, but we had to be real tight-lipped about it, and that we couldn't use it in any prosecutions. So when he was presenting cases to Truman, he's not bringing up the Venona projects because he's doing this shit in secret. And even more so, we can't give this to the DOJ because the moment it becomes public, all of a sudden Moscow knows that we're decrypting all their shit and that we've got access to their shit, and that, and they might switch to a different system. Right. Unfortunately, he didn't know that was already infiltrated. So it was a moot point. But again, McCarthy never knows about the Venona documents. He's never given any of this evidence. So it's important to know that what he's working with is he's working with his hands tied behind his back. He's only got rumors and speculation, as well as, we know some things, right? We know that, the nuclear bombs, he's got his buddies, he's got J.B. Matthews, he's got Whittaker Chambers. He knows there's a problem. He knows there's a subcommittee, he knows there's disparities in numbers. He knows there's a lot of problems. Latimer proposal, all these things, but he doesn't have the hard evidence proof of the Venona documents.
Well, and I think that the importance of that point is that even though he may have been operating off a lot of gut feeling, that a contemporaneous institution that actually had the evidence is basically showing that his gut feeling was correct. Right. So it's not just, it's not like we didn't find out until 40 years later. We had an organization that knew at the time. It's just he didn't have access to that information.
But see, the thing is that this makes the Red Scare worse. Because the FBI starts opening investigations into people, presumably with no evidence, because they've got secret spies telling them shit like Elizabeth Bentley, and they've got secret communications that they can't tell anybody about it. And so the FBI starts harassing and hounding people that they suspect of being spies, but the only evidence they have is shit that they're not allowed to talk about and they can't release. FISA court shit all over again. So people are like, the government's coming after innocent people and violating their civil liberties, when really J. Edgar Hoover is just trying his darndest to get rid of communists out of the fucking government.
Yeah, it's definitely a conundrum, right? Because if I'm alive at the time, knowing my skeptical nature, I'm probably saying well, then show the goods. If you're going after these people, let's see the goods, right? And they're like, well, the mere fact if we would show you the goods means we won't get any more, because that would force us to out how we got this, which would mean it would no longer be relevant.
Exactly.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's what do you do in that situation? Well, what they did is they kept that shit secret for no fucking reason, because Moscow knew anyways. Because what they didn't know is that William Weisband was a compromised Russian spy, and he was a linguist that was at the very top of the project. And he had access to fucking everything. So one of the linguists that's helping them decrypt things is actually actively working against people in some regards, slipping in little mistakes when he can, and is reporting everything that they find out, which means that Moscow has the go ahead to know oh shit, they just found this, act fast. They're able to get assets out and things like the important assets.
Yeah, and he would also, if you think about it, he would be enough to just slip small amounts of things in to discredit it enough that the average person or the average person in the administration or
they would never know,
just on the street Right, you would be like, well, wait a minute, maybe 80% of this is true, but the one thing we do know is this 1% is false, so why would we believe the rest of it? So you can see how that would really basically ruin the whole project, because if you can't be certain that your intelligence is 100% true, it's impossible to act knowing there's a 10%.
Yeah, he wasn't able to like really do that much to derail the project, but he was able to get a massive amount of info, because like every accident he makes, if it gets discovered by somebody else, and it always happens to be one guy.
Himself.
Yeah, and you're working on a secret project for the fucking government as a linguist,
Right.
like that's a good way to get disappeared or accidentally suicide with 2 bullet holes in the back of your head.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like you're double agent. You know what I mean? You got to be careful.
Yep.
So, this is where your boy's concern in chat comes in. The myth of targeting innocents. When he gives his speech to Congress, they're demanding that he names names. He's interrupted 123 times during his speech, and he refuses to name a single name and instead regards them by case number. And he says, if I were to give all the names involved, it might leave a wrong impression. If we should label one man a communist when he is not a communist, I think that would be too bad. And then he refuses to name names, refuses to dox people, essentially.
Right.
So that's just
admirable. Like,
yeah, like he refers to them by case number in his speech to Congress to make sure that he protects the identity of suspected spies moving forward.
See, that's the opposite. The impression that we have, right? The impression that people have is McCarthy was like Jim Smith, communist, but it was the opposite. He was more illustrating the problem in general without giving the specific name.
Right. So then the other criticism you'll hear all the time is, well, his list was debunked. Like his number was all wrong. There was a bunch of people that weren't on the list, etc. And like, none of those people were really spies, right? Well, his false list was immediately debunked by, you guessed it, journalists and Hollywood and famous people. And then guess who did the initial investigation without any oversight? The State Department.
Right.
They investigated themselves and found nothing, right? So he comes out with a list of 110 people. Out of those 110 people, 62 were still in the State Department at the time. Out of that, he focuses his investigation on 49 people, essentially thinking 13 of these are spurious. We don't really know. And the accusation isn't that big a deal. But despite them investigating themselves and finding nothing, eventually by 1954, 3 years before McCarthyism is over, right? 81 of the 110 had left by either resignation or been fired. So out of his list of 110 people, at the end of it all, by 54, basically 75% of them had been fired or forced to resign.
Right.
They were fucking spies, and they knew it. So when people tell you, oh, he was totally wrong, he didn't find anybody, looks like he found fucking 81 right here in the State Department alone.
Yeah.
So let's start talking about some of these people whose lives were ruined by the McCarthyism, right? Some of these people that were lambasted and brought before Congress, and all these horrible things happened to them. After years of investigations, constant dismissals, John Stewart Service, remember that guy with Amerasia? He was finally fired in 1951. But the Supreme Court reinstated his job in 1956 as American counsel to England, and then he became faculty until he retired from UC Berkeley and became a New York Times columnist.
That sounds about right. Berkeley.
That sounds like parody. That doesn't even sound real. Like when I tell you that this guy was a literal communist spy that finally got fired, and then you 5 years later, the Supreme Court gives him a job as an American counsel to England, which is basically like a bullshit job to get money and not do shit. And then becomes faculty at UC Berkeley and a New York Times columnist, expert on Asian American politics.
That's good stuff. Yeah.
Owen Lattimore, remember the Lattimore proposal? He was a named spy by McCarthy in closed meetings, and it leaked to the press. This is one of the things that they'll say, oh, he named this man. He named this man. Like he ruined this man's life because he named him, and and all of this other stuff. Well, he only named him in a closed meeting where you're supposed to be able to say names. It wasn't him naming anybody. It was that it leaked to the press. Owen was cleared of all charges until in 1952, a Senate Internal Security Subcommittee charged him as a Soviet spy. And you think to yourself and you go, Well, that just sounds like a witch hunt, right? He was cleared of all charges and then he gets charged again. His life was ruined by the lies, right? Well, he became a professor at Johns Hopkins. He was a liaison for John F. Kennedy administration in Mongolia. He headed a new department of Chinese studies in 1963 at the University of England. Lived his life in academia, working for the Kennedy administration, government jobs, cushy government jobs, and Asian studies department in England. Yeah, really ruined his fucking life, huh?
Right.
From 1953 to 1954, McCarthy headed investigations into 114 government employees to enforce. I wrote a Hatch Act of 1939. It's a typo. I don't know why I put that. It's 46. Disregard that typo, please. I don't know why I didn't fix it, but I didn't fix it. But he investigated 114 government employees. And again, this was the law of the land. This wasn't a witch hunt to prosecute people. The Hatch Act says if you're a government employee and you're associated with Nazis and fascists or communists or any other totalitarian regime or party, that you're supposed to be removed. Well, the funny thing is, as we continue forward, the State Department eventually became stricter and dismissed 4,000 employees, most of whom obtained government jobs elsewhere. So they moved from dealing with top secret shit to working at other portions of the government. And you may think, well, that's obviously a red scare, right? Thousands of people being fucking fired and shit for spurious associations. Like, isn't that bad? Isn't that like really fucked up? Well, funny thing is in 1954, Otto Otepka, who was a State Department security specialist, found that 1,943 suspicious personnel, right? That these people had like reasons to be suspicious that there might be a problem. And of those people, he later told a Senate committee that 722, quote, left the department for various reasons, but mostly by transfer to other agencies before final security determination was made. So these totally innocent people, people, like at least a fifth of them, right, were like, as they're being investigated, they're like, oh, I got a job elsewhere. Investigation's over. Because that's what the administration was really doing. That's what the executive was doing, was just basically investigating them and then letting them go get a government job elsewhere. Which is absurd.
That sort of stuff happens today in various ways. One example that comes to mind is Igor Dushenko, who's the guy who was the primary subsource for the Steele dossier. He was actually being investigated as a Russian spy in 2008 by the FBI. And the way that investigation closed was he left. Dushenko got wind of the investigation, so he left. And then he comes back a decade later, and it's like, oh,
well, no, it's not a decade later. It's after we got rid of that guy and put in somebody that was solid. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's like, and now it's different in this sense. That's a foreign national, and he's leaving the country. So it's not like he got a job at a different, government department. But it is true that the way these things work, these investigations, they're very narrowly tailored most of the time, that they're looking at a particular institution or a particular person. And when situation changes, then it ends the investigation, which is a combination.
It's a combination of stupidity, incompetence, and intentional nepotism and bureaucracy.
Too.
Yeah.
Right,
so
because go ahead. Yeah.
This is a really important point here, because people will say, oh, this guy, like, you remember that guy that was in your chat that was saying like, oh, he's fucking outing all these people. Funny little thing. Yeah. From 1953 to 1954, Joseph McCarthy maintained the identity and secrecy of 653 witnesses. He kept their names and their identity completely secret. 653. He kept that shit close. The only leak he ever had was Latterman, and that he had one leak. Only those who refused to answer as state actors were brought before public hearings, which is to say they tried to plead the Fifth Amendment, but the Hatch Act requires that you disprove, which you can say is not a good standard of evidence. But what we're talking about here is whether or not you're qualified to be a government employee with a top secret security clearance. We're not talking about whether or not we should fire you from the Denny's, or whether or not, you know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about whether or not you're being charged with a crime. None of these people are being charged with a crime. Right. They're just being fired.
That's the important thing. Right. So with the Fifth Amendment, right? Like, I could see someone saying, well, wait, if they're charging them because they pled the Fifth, so they're charging with the crime, that's one thing. But just saying, look, if you don't answer this, you can't work here. That's
right. And so if they answered and they were honest and they were like, here's what I know, here's all the documents, and they cooperated, he maintained their secrecy, including people that were fired that had communist sympathies or had been in the Communist Party, or their like wife was a communist, whatever. He kept their identities secret too. He just said, you don't belong in our government. Right.
That's an important point. Yeah.
So moving forward. Oh, sorry. That's the last slide. That's the last thing. That was the last point I wanted to hit. So, that is my presentation on why I believe that McCarthy was fucking right and based.
So let me some questions to follow up.
Of course.
Do you think, or is there evidence, right, that once McCarthy, sort of the pushback comes to McCarthy, do you think that the Soviet era still or the Soviet Union at the time then increased the amount of spies that they had back to sort of levels before?
No, because I think what happened was the Red Scare, and I think all of these departments got cleaned up. They fired 4,000 employees, right? I think they started doing much better security and background checks and things like that to make sure that they knew who the fuck they were giving documents and secret shit to. In the fight against communism, and as the Cold War ramped up, I think, obviously there was still espionage, but I think a lot of these problems excised themselves in the government. In academia and Hollywood, they were not fixed. And in journalism, not fixed.
That's interesting because I know, again, to shit on the person that was questioning this in the chat, then it turns out that maybe McCarthy actually was the exact type office to do it, right? Because even if that person's right, that there wasn't a lot of people directly that went down because of McCarthyism, if he spurred the impetus that he basically was a martyr that they came after, but behind the scenes, people were like, okay, time to clean our shit up, then there's no doubt it was worth it. There would be no doubt at all.
Oh yeah, without McCarthy, we likely would have maintained some communist spies at the very head of our at the very highest levels of our government. People that were in the room with the president of the United States were known communist spies that the FBI knew about and couldn't do anything about. I mean, think about that. The number 2 person at the State Department and the number 2 person at the Treasury Department and a cabinet member for Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
That's unreal. And I'll see what you think about this. Again, I have to admit that we're all a victim of just knowing what we lived through, right? And so again, I go back to this idea of I don't know what it's like to flip a coin who's going to win, the United States or the Soviets. I've never lived in a world like that. When we think of spies today, or to me, the impression I get is less a Chinese spy that's, these exist and they're giving.
Why does it gotta be Chinese, Rob Noerr?
Well,
what you got against the Chinese?
Right? You know why.
What do you got against Chinese drivers? Okay.
Yeah, right. Or attractive Chinese ladies that are sleeping with their congressman.
Of course.
It almost always part of that story has to do with personal enrichment. Right? Someone's getting involved with this because they're getting paid a huge deal of money by China or something.
Right.
That's not good, and it's still worth, rooting out. Don't get me wrong. But that's different than someone literally this could dip the scale to where our country could be overrun. That's a different level of espionage. The stakes are so much higher and different.
That's 2 world superpowers, right. 2 world empires competing to see who will run the world.
Right. And
it's a whole different game. And it's a new ideology that has captured true believers in the religion of Marxism. It's not the same thing as somebody that was blackmailed.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's just really the stakes of it. I think that to me is something that's difficult still to wrap my head around, but try to imagine yourself, if you're a true patriot, if you're someone like McCarthy that's I'm literally worried that this is going to lead to the downfall of this country and the world being ran by these evil fuckers that are starving their people by the millions, right? That are basically just as heinous. And, for anyone that doesn't know, if you read Gulag Archipelago, Solzhenitsyn and stuff, the horrors that you talk about what was going on in the Soviet Union, everyone rightfully looks at the Nazis and the concentration camps. There was horrors going on in the Soviet Union. So if you were aware, look, this shit is likely to be worldwide if we don't root out these spies. Think of the pressure that puts on you to be able to, want to do something.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think both of them have the bomb now, and it's just you and them and the bomb. And like I said, I think the thing that puts it in context more than anything is in the Wheeler speech, right? Let me see if I can find it real quick, because I want to actually use his words. I'm not going to read the whole Wheeler speech, but I think, or Wheeling, sorry.
Right.
McCarthy. See if I can find it. Let's see. Is it here? Oh, no, this isn't it. Give me a PDF. Give me a PDF. Don't fuck with me by giving me like summaries of it. I hate when they do that shit.
Yeah.
All right. So he says, where are the numbers at? Here we go. 6 years ago, there was within the Soviet orbit 180 million people. Lined up on the authoritarian side, there were on the world at the time roughly 1.625 billion people. Today, only 6 years later, there are 800 million people under the absolute dominion of Soviet Russia, an increase of over 400%. On our side, the figure has shrunk to around 500 million. In other words, in less than 6 years, the odds have changed from 9-1 in our favor to 8-5 against us.
That's surreal. That's unbelievable.
Like to imagine living in a world like that, 9-1 to then 8-5.
And let me ask you this. I don't know if you'll know this, right? But most of that, right, I would chalk up to not that they had a superior economy or they had a superior culture or they had a superior military. I would chalk it up to the will, right? That they were willing to be the aggressor. They were willing to go out.
There's a lot of things. I think the other thing is that America and Russia were the two least damaged countries with any real amount of power during World War II. Like the rest of those things that would have been a superpower just before World War I against them are bombed to shit and in financial ruin, right? So it's like 5 years before that, 1940, Russia would have never have tried that shit. England and Germany and all them and France would have fucking rolled them over like a joke if they tried to go out. But now Russia and America, like relatively, I don't want to say undamaged. Like obviously they lost a lot of soldiers and they had a lot of bombs and things, but not in the way that like England was bombed or France or like, you know what I mean? And then on top of that, Eastern Europe was so deeply weakened by the Blitzkrieg and then by Nazi occupation and then the fight on that front between Russia and them, that it was just ripe for the taking.
Yeah, I guess geographically that makes sense. But what I was saying more is like, it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong about this, the United States was more apprehensive and being like, okay, we're just going to go take shit over now. We're one of the two dogs left standing. So, it seemed like the Soviets weren't really impeded by that. They were like, okay, all of our neighbors are fucked. It's ripe for the taking. We're coming. And I think that speaks towards an aggression that maybe people don't understand. That it wasn't just, we're happy to be where, people are just willingly accepting communism.
I think they think about it like Vietnam, right? Which is that we had no fucking reason to be in Vietnam.
Right.
We had ideological reasons to be in Vietnam. We had no fucking reason to bomb the living shit out of Laos, right? We committed horrors in Vietnam. American government has committed so many fucking crimes, and so many people that got to walk free deserve to have been fucking buried under the prison for the shit that occurred in Vietnam. Right? And so when people think about like the Cold War and the fight against communism, I think most people's minds don't go to the Chinese nationalists and communists fighting in the proxy war. They don't even go to the Korean War. Right? And like what happened in the Korean War, their mind goes to Vietnam and baby killers and like us being in a country like that, like didn't really have an onus to be in, and like us fighting on behalf of France to like maintain a population under liberal democracy while half the fucking people didn't want that shit to begin with. Right? And so I think our mind is kind of colored by the perception of what came after. These people never experienced Vietnam. People never experienced, they experienced the beginning of the Korean War, and they experienced a world empire be birthed overnight just after having lived through World War II. And now these people have the nuke and they're fucking rolling over countries left and right with an ideology that puts people in mass body graves and in gulags.
Yeah, and I think, another way to put it in perspective is like, what wars do we know? Now, if you've served in a war, I don't care where you're at, it's horrific. Like, I get that, right? But like wars today are fought over insurgencies, right? Like, imagine being alive in World War II. Like, I mean, there's a generation of people that lived through World War I and II and then had to see the fall. Like, that's a different understanding of how bad shit could get, right?
Right.
Like,
there are people that lived through World War I, then the Great Depression, then World War II, then the fucking Cold War. And those people are some hardy motherfuckers.
Right. We lose in Afghanistan. And we're embarrassed. Right, you lose World War II and you're done. Like it's a different stakes. But I think one of the things that this makes me think about.
I never would have been if I had the power. I never would have been involved in World War II.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Like it's definitely interesting. But here's what.
I'd have just fucking built up South America. I'd have just fucking been like, oh, while you guys are fighting your world war, we're just going to do everything we can to get free trade and like better treaties and negotiations with South America. And I would have let fucking Europe kill itself while we get stronger and have a better defensive force and let them do whatever the fuck they want. And then maybe, who knows, maybe Germany wins and Europe falls. I don't know. But you know what? South America would have been nothing but liberal democracies with fucking free market capitalism and shit, because I'd have been working hard on getting all those people together.
Well, I don't know. I would have to think. I haven't thought about this heavily, so I'm not endorsing that mindset. But I understand where.
Yeah, I mean, who fucking knows? It's a crystal ball scenario.
Right. Listening to all this though, like I am sympathetic to McCarthy, like from the information I'm getting. But there are a couple things in there that's like, okay, if I'm challenging myself. So, for example, the idea that I forget the name of the organization, but the Chinese organization that we were backing, that we were basically funding a project.
Yeah, the Chinese nationalists under Ching Shek or
Doesn't that have? Okay, yeah, excellent. That kind of has tinges, and I know it's way different and it's way more corrupt now, of our involvement in Ukraine. Right. So someone could have listened to what you just said and say, Rob, you've heavily criticized our involvement in Ukraine. But isn't that very similar? Doesn't the fact that we stopped that sort of involvement in China and then the communists took over, wouldn't that be what happens in Ukraine?
Right.
Now, I think that it's very different, but it does give you pause. It's definitely a criticism that you could make of my position. That's like, well,
from my position, I would have been right with Dexter White. Would have been a communist spy, but I'd have been like, yeah, why the fuck are we spending hundreds of millions of dollars on that? We need to be beefing our own shit up.
Yeah, and I kind of feel the same way, right? And then also, like where you mentioned that basically the OSS, right, decides to kind of off the books keep the Venona project. If that shit happened today, I'll guarantee you I'd be livid. Like if it was like the president says this shit will stop, and I know it because I've been bitching.
Let's imagine that the problem is happening today and that the State Department is actually filled with secret neo-Nazis that want to take over the government. And let's imagine that the FBI in its current state just starts investigating government officials and congressmen and we're like, yeah, we got FISA warrants, don't worry about it. And just starts arresting random right-wing Republicans. You better believe we'd be doing the exact same shit the fucking commies were doing at that time, going, yo, what the fuck happened to civil liberties? Why are you investigating all these people and locking up? The FBI is a politicized organization going after right-wingers and attacking us. We're making those claims now. And that's
right.
That's reason number 634 that I'm an anarcho-capitalist libertarian.
Right. But having said all of that, even those criticisms, to go back to answer the criticisms I'd be making myself but none of that's on McCarthy, right? McCarthy wasn't.
Exactly.
He wasn't right. He was operating within the scope of the law.
They make it about McCarthy. They make it about McCarthy by calling it McCarthyism and associating the Red Scare and McCarthyism as the same thing, so that the true heroes that were actually doing shit to stop communism, so that side of the story doesn't get told. Because the side of the story that they tell is an important story. The violations of people's civil liberties, the way that the state was used to hound civilians, the way that some innocent people were brought before HUAC, and the only thing they ever did wrong was have the wrong political philosophy. But the problem is that Hollywood and the media and our textbooks have been telling that story for 70 years and burying the other side of the story, which is why I made this presentation. It's not that I don't think that there weren't problems. It's not that I don't think the Red Scare didn't have issues. It's that how the fuck can how the fuck can we have an accurate representation of history or what we should do if you're only telling half of the story?
Yeah, and that's why I said I was so interested in talking about this, because to me, you should always seek out silver linings and stuff, right? And so when I see the corruption occurring today, not just politically, but culturally, and sort of all of our institutions going the same way and telling the same narrative, just think about that. Like, take a simple issue like Black Lives Matter, right? Mm-hmm. Every major institution in this country was like, yeah, they're fantastic people, fantastic organization. And maybe you still believe that. Well, I don't, but maybe that's something people believe.
I don't either.
But really, there's no room for pushback. There's no room for wait a minute. Like, let's see exactly what's going on. Now that
like $700 million is missing, and like everyone that is at the top of your organization has mansions now. Can we talk about this? No, I'm a racist. Okay, all right, Roger.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, now imagine, right? The difference is this: we're living through it, right? So we'll be able to tell. If our kids ask about it, we'll be able to say, well, this is what was happening, at least from my perspective, right? Can't do that with McCarthy. And not only that, like, I don't even know any, like, I'd have to do, like, there's probably no one alive that I know that I could do that with that saw that. And even if they were, like, you talk to your like,
they're 80 years old.
Right. Like, when I talk to my grandparents about politics, like, or, you know,
she's just sitting there. Your 80-year-old grandma is sitting there shuffling confectionate sugar over the pie she's making for you, just going, McCarthy? What do I think about McCarthy? Well, you know, communism was bad, but I think the most important thing is that he went after those N-words and all those all those homosexuals. And you're like, Jesus Christ, Grandma, I'm sorry I asked you about history. Keep making that fucking pie.
Yeah. Let's go back to what's in the pie. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
Thanks for the lemon meringues, but Jesus.
Yeah. So it's I think it's why it's important to look at these things. Like, and again, like, there's so many taboo subjects that it's just like, we don't even know why. I couldn't have told you when I came out of high school, right? 19, 20 years old. I couldn't have told you why I hated McCarthy, but I did. I knew that he was a shithead.
Right.
Why? Because McCarthyism, it's bad. It's just, it's lynching people, basically. It's a terrible thing. And
I have something coming out. I have something coming out for an anarchist seminar that I've yet to release. And we will release that recording eventually, which is another large presentation similar to this one on the Civil War. And just as a few sneak peeks about the Civil War, how many people here know about the Panic of 1857? How many people know about the Morrill tariffs? How many people know that almost nearly up to 1 million black people were killed by Abraham Lincoln in contraband camps from 1861 to 1867? Or the sinking of the CSS Central America? The story we were told about the Civil War is also very different. And any questioning about anything immediately becomes, lost cause racist, trying to make it not about slavery.
Right. And I mean, it's very much like, and again, as someone who's for free speech and against cancel culture, and people, if you agree with me on that, then you should be open to try to listen to people. And I listen to people that defend shit that I think's heinous. I do. Like I said, I debated Richard Spencer. I despise white nationalists.
I want to debate Richard Spencer. That'd be fucking dope. Because that fucker calls himself a libertarian, so I have a massive fucking bone to pick with that piece of shit.
Dude,
mostly because it's like, don't you dare fucking claim my name under your bullshit. You're a fucking socialist and you're a fucking racist. And I care more about you being a socialist than the fact that you're a racist. I'm not in that when you're claiming my fucking ideology.
Well, he admitted that. And I would guess that 90 to 95% of white nationalists are socialists. It's baked into what they want. Right. It's baked into what they want. They want an authoritarian.
The Nazis were socialists.
Government.
The fascists were socialists. Well, I mean, to be fair, they were national syndicalists, which is a form of socialism. And really, you don't get like right-wing white supremacist socialists until you get like third positionists after. But like, they're basically socialists.
Right. Like the more libertarian you become, it's completely antithetical to that. You could be libertarian and say, like, listen, like, because they have this racial enclave thing, right? Where they're like, we just want to live with our race and leave it so, but they want to enforce it through the state. So you can't be a small government libertarian and believe that the state should enforce racial enclavism. I mean, that's insanity.
Oh, hey,
very definition.
I have a question from chat, but it's more of a suggestion. If you ever want some like really good content as well. You should check out Curtis Yarvin on Tucker's long form podcast thing that he does.
Okay.
It's about 75 minutes. You know who Curtis Yarvin is?
No.
Mencius Moldbug, probably the smartest right-wing philosopher alive today in terms of politics. Really? Mencius Moldbug turned, eventually he was, doxxed. So some people know him as Mencius Moldbug, but his name is Curtis Yarvin. And it really goes into like a kind of a real right-wing philosophical position about like the state and the cathedral and how the elites work and how the elites changed. And it's very, I think you'd really find it really interesting. Good stuff.
Yeah,
and
I'll check it out.
It's supposed to be a 60-minute show, and it goes an extra 15 minutes longer because Tucker Carlson is just sitting there smiling like, like Tucker Carlson can't like deal with how based he is for 75 minutes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The reason I took that Richard Spencer debate, I had an agenda. Right. And I got him to say over and over and over and over again that he's a Biden supporter and that white supremacy makes more sense in the Democratic Party. Over and over and over, I got him to say that because I'm sick and tired of you voted for this person who David Duke endorsed, so you have to answer for that. It's like, okay, well, the most prominent white nationalist in this country is a full-on supporter of the Democratic Party and Joe Biden, so do you have to answer for that? Oh, it's different. Now it's different. Now
right.
Guilt by association.
Now by guilt by association doesn't matter when it's, but that's accelerationism. That's not,
Well, that could be true. It could be that Spencer's an accelerationist.
I think that's why he's a supporter of the Democrats, not because of anything.
I would agree.
Yeah, is that he thinks that I think that he thinks that it will just bring about right-wing reactionary stuff.
Right, I agree. That's what he thinks, but I do think that he's telling the truth when he says that he understands that ideologically wise, the sort of big government socialist Democrat is more representative of what most white nationalists want. I mean, it is insane. Just listen. Look, trust me, it's cringeworthy. It makes you sick in the stomach to listen to these white nationalists. But when you listen to them, they're socialist. And not just because the reason I just said, they're full on advocate for socialist policies all the time. Like, and so it's just amazing. And I've always said this, like, when I'm arguing, you remember that person, he was supposedly inspired by the New Zealand shooter, and he shot up like Hispanic people at a mall, a Walmart or something.
I was about to say which one, because the most recent one of the more recent ones is basically copy and pasted from that dude's manifesto. That's the most, and just happened to be in a Discord server with two FBI agents.
Right. But this guy, it was prior to that. So this
the mall, and like it was a Walmart, like real deep in south of the Texas, and it was like one of those Walmarts that like people cross the border all the time to go to that Walmart and then go back into Mexico.
Yeah. So my point was, I think it's absurd to like say that just because someone shares some ideological beliefs of mine, that I'm beholden to their more extreme, stupid ideological beliefs. But if we're going to play that game, it's like, let me tell you, let me just suggest this. Here's a person that thought that race was the most important thing in life, and that everything boils down to race in one way or another, and that the race that he has an affinity for, every system is racist towards them, and that we need to rise up and have some sort of battle, no justice, no peace. Now, what party does that sound like to you? Right? Like,
I mean, they're the same ideology. It's like you hear it from the CRT Black Lives Matter crowd all the time, right? Is like, and this is something that most people don't pick up on, but when you look at their writings and you look at the way that they write, right, you'll notice that they always capitalize black when talking about black people, right? And you'll notice that they call people folks all the time. And do you know what the origin of why they do these two things are?
The capitalization. A little bit, not folks. I have no clue on it.
It's Volkism. It's the same ideology that led to Nazism, like Volk, Ein Volk, blood and soil. The idea comes from black liberation philosophy. And the idea is that black people are a nationality unto themselves, and that they're an oppressed nation that needs to rise up and assert their own independence so that they can usher in like a new peace for their own racial people. Now, the thing is that almost nobody on that side actually, when you say that, they call you crazy, even though it's in their fucking writings. And that's because most people don't understand the etymological or, roots of their movement or the philosophy of their movement. They're either useful idiots, which I call stage 4, right? And I call stage 3, I call because I have a classification of like wokeness that I've developed, right? So stage 4 are useful idiots. These are the Democrats that like take their kids to a drag queen show because like they think it's the good thing to do and like they're being progressive, right? Then you have stage 3. This is the vanguard, right? These are your like Twitter lefties and your fucking, well, not like your Twitch streamer lefties and your activists and like your Antifa types, right? They're out there fighting the fight, either in ideological spaces, debates, or, you know, physically on the streets, right?
Right.
But they don't really understand the philosophy that well either. They're just like the vanguard party of like the Russian Revolution. Then you have stage 3. These are the academics. These are true believers, and they actually understand the philosophy. And they understand that the philosophy, huh?
That's stage 2, you mean?
Stage 2. Yeah, sorry, stage 2. So that, or level 2 if you want, if you prefer, or it's a pyramid. It's a pyramid basically, right? Level 2 of the pyramid is the academics, the intelligentsia. They understand this shit. This is Ibram Kendi and, you know, Stefanik and Delgado and, you know, like all of these like high-minded individuals that are churning out these papers and shit. And they try and hide their shit because they're trying to convince other people their shit. But they know deep in their hearts that they hate capitalism. They hate the success of the West, and that they eventually want to usher in like a stateless communist society and that the socialism will be great. Level 1 are the true elites that are Marcusian. They believe that the best thing they can do for their own personal power and wealth, and the best thing to do for the people, is to give more and more power to the government and allow the government to get better and better, because voting and education and like that government always gets better over time despite its mistakes, and that eventually you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And that just happens to be that I'm one of the wealthy people that, you know, at the World Economic Forum that gets to fly around on my private jet. And you people can live in cubes and like be under the thumb of the government, but you'll be happy because the government will get better and better and better and better, and government services will get better and better and better. And the state will become a perfect state society of socialism. That's the pyramid of wokeness. And once you recognize that you have to identify what part of the pyramid you're engaging with in that person, you understand more about their philosophy, and you understand more about like what they actually know and don't know and what they believe.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought of it in the levels like that, but I think intuitively I understand that, because you approach dealing with these people in completely different ways, right? The person that, like, I deal with people all the time, like, and I tell people this, and I think they think I'm fucking crazy, but from the bottom of the heart, I mean this. I have a lot of left-leaning friends.
Right.
I do. I mean, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. Everyone I know is blue collar. Probably 90% of the people I know in my area.
Just real quick chat. We don't befriend lefties. We just fuck them. All right. Continue.
Oh, okay.
Don't stick your dick in crazy.
Disavow. Sometimes crazy's fun, boys.
So anyways, so that's who I grew up with, but I went to college and I did policy debate. It's the left of the left. And I made friends in there, but even just dipping your toes into what you would call level 3, like dipping your, no one was that. We just learned about this shit to debate it. We weren't experts at it. We weren't right. You learn how to talk the talk to win an argument. That's it. That's different than having a deep understanding and living your life based on this ideology. So there are people that are friends of mine that, like, for example, would basically freak the fuck out when Trump won because I voted for a racist, and I had to like talk them off the ledge, you know. And most of the people that I deal with like that, I don't talk politics. Right? Or I throw the smallest little thing in, right?
Yeah. I do the same thing. I'm a fucking ANCAP. I don't talk to people about politics because they go, fucking what, dude? Like,
good luck at the Thanksgiving table discussing ANCAP, you know, with your aunt or something. Right. Like, so that's how I feel. And I tell people that all the time. And like, I think this is it's maybe something that you would agree with. It's sort of a libertarian philosophy, which is, even if you hate the state, and even if you think the state's doing a bunch of heinous shit, your personal life still comes first and still most important. So I could live in my
it's an individualist philosophy.
That's right.
I will say I disagree. My children's life come first. My life comes second.
Well, right, but the way you look at it, and I tell people,
but I'm just saying, if somebody's fucking over my kids, like you know, public schools or something, all of a sudden my life doesn't fucking matter as much.
That's right. Now, I'm lucky. I live in a bubble. Like, so far, a lot of that shit isn't as it exists, but nowhere near the level that these people in some of the more woke areas deal with. But I tell people, I don't think they believe me when I tell, like, I get pissed off. I'm sitting here yelling about corruption or yelling about some of the most heinous things that you can imagine, sexualization of children and stuff. But honestly, it's cathartic to me when I turn the camera off and I'm hanging out with my son and my wife. It's like, I'm not a raving lunatic that's just like, damn, this politics. Like, I kind of shut it off.
Thank you.
And I'm like, oh, this is the real important shit. But that doesn't.
I want to add one thing.
Fighting.
I want to add one thing, just a little trick for people. You can tell if someone is in stage 2, moving into stage 3, or that they're full blown, or sorry, stage 3 moving into stage 2, or that they're like, you can tell how far they are in that spectrum. Forget the top of the pyramid. That's a totally different class of people. They look at everyone below them as useful idiots because they're gaining all the wealth and power, and they're just using the ideology for their own means, and they believe like a socialist state is going to make everything great because they'll run it. But for all of the other levels, you can tell, listen to the tonal quality of the way that they speak when they speak about politics or issues. Because the more woke somebody is, the more they go from a useful idiot into being like a part of the vanguard, or like and like moving into even the academia thing. You can listen to Rob, Noerr, and I speak, and we speak based off of a dialect of where we're from and our passion and like what language we picked up from our accent. But when you speak to someone that's super woke, what you hear is a California lilt, and you will also see nodding and physical movements of approval when people say the right words that are trigger words for their religion. You see it all the time. It's a catatonic like state almost, where someone will be doing a lecture and they'll be like, what we need to deal with the systemic racism. And so they're doing that, right? And they're doing that California speak, and you'll see the crowd physically, not the snaps, you'll see them do this. And they won't say it because of a point. Rob, Noerr, and I will agree because one of us said something that is interesting, or one of us said something that like made us think. They'll do this when they hear the right words. It's a ritualistic behavior. This is why it's like so close to a religion, because someone will say systemic racism or, any one of those trigger words, like food deserts. Someone will be like, the black community and the food deserts and like, you'll see people like, except they haven't said anything yet. All they said was the trigger word.
Yeah, and there's a cadence, right?
Mm-hmm. It's like a California it's like a California Valley Girl speech.
And it's very performative. Like, here's another type. I can't think of this guy. What's the name of the guy? Black guy. At one point, he debated Stephen Fry and Jordan Peterson. Michael Eric Dyson.
Yeah. The vociferitude of the vociferativeness of what it means to be in the whiteness of America.
So in debate, there were certain, it's weird. You would think, and don't get me wrong, a lot of debaters were people that academically were very intelligent. When I made it to the top tournament, I had to qualify for the national debate tournament. I think my SAT score, I took them when they were out of 1600. I think my SAT score was a 1210. I by far had the lowest SAT score of anyone that qualified for that tournament. Like the round 2, I debated 2 freshmen from Harvard that both had perfect SAT scores. We were talking about the Aegis missile defense system on our naval carriers, and I read a piece of evidence from like this admiral, and they were like, actually, if you go 3 pages later, he says this, and they quoted it verbatim. And I'm like looking through the book like, holy shit, like you didn't just know what he said. It's like
you have perfect fucking eidentic memory. Like how the fuck am I supposed to compete with that?
Yeah, a real nice kid. But I lost on I won that round. The judge fucked me, but it was just because the guy made a mistake. But nonetheless, he was an interesting guy, this guy was debating. But you would think with people that are that intelligent, quote unquote, that they would be less likely to follow someone else, or
more likely,
right? And that's, you could pick it. Like, you remember, like I was a big fan of like the 90s NBA, and each team had an identity. Like the Pistons were these dirty fucking physical throwing elbows players, and it was like, or even now it's like, oh, you're an Oakland Raider, there's a personality that comes like it. That's how debate schools were, right?
Okay. So I'm gonna do a cool little thing, right? Hear me out. I promise it'll be enjoyable and fun. This is why, first of all, there's no correlation between wisdom and IQ, G factor, intelligence, right? But second of all, The smarter you are, the easier it is to fall down an ideology, because you can make anything about an ideology. So what I'm going to do is I challenge you to come up with any product in America that, like, I would know, obviously, any institution or anything, no matter how ridiculous, and then I will just prove to you that it's racist.
I love these sorts of games, right? So I'll say Charmin toilet paper.
Charmin toilet paper. All right. So Charmin, okay, many of you don't realize that Charmin toilet paper is actually racist. Now, of course, first of all, like, obviously it's a market good sold within a capitalist system that is already based upon the idea that Charmin is this higher level of product that is designed in some way to be better towards the health. And if people were freely given the resources that they need, white people wouldn't have this extra ability to be able to clean themselves in such a regard. But setting aside the evils of capitalism and its racist implications that it has because of the systemic injustice that's done to us, you can see even from the marketing campaigns of the idea of the cuddly Negro that is utilized in these advertisements that they put in bear form to try and make this docilized small product of which we could never afford, that is constantly used against us. That's just me riffing, right? But you get the idea. When you're smart, right? And I'm not trying to brag, but I'm smart. You're able to take your ideological framework and apply it in the most ridiculous and stupid fucking ways to literally anything. But that means you're able to convince yourself that your ideology is true, because a dumb person hears that Charmin Ultra's racist and they go, fucking toilet paper, dog? Like, I got problems. Yeah, like, what are you talking about? Right. And exactly. So I think stupid people in some ways are yeah, I just made up the term cuddly Negro, like, whatever. but like, you know what I mean? Like, I just made it up. Like, some academic would fucking coin that shit in a heartbeat if it was like and say that it's a representation of black people that pacifies black power and voices in space and tries to, you know, minimize who they are and the impacts that we've had, whatever. Right. It's just some shit I made up. But yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, stupid people, I think, in many ways are, like, less likely to be ideologically captured because of that, because the real world just kind of speaks to them in a way that might confront their ideology, and they can't match this weird ideology that doesn't match reality in their head. Whereas that Harvard kid, man, that kid can make anything racist if he wanted to.
Right. And here's the proof of it. So you would think that, like, as far as IQ, the debate community probably significantly higher than sort of the average blue collar worker. And so if you were my parents, for example, and you're like, our son's a pretty good debater, let's go see him debate, you might expect something like the last debate me and you had, two people talking like this, advocating their positions, right? You know what you would get when you walked in? My opponent thinks that he needs everything that he understands because he talks about proliferation to China. McCarthy thinks it's better than every country in the world, but when he understands McCarthy section,
yeah.
People, that's what debate is. Right? It's literally
formal debates.
And so
formal debates are
so stupid. The reason that happened was, right, the reason that happened is because you had all these people that are smarter than everyone else. And it's like, well, I could talk a little faster and understand it. And I want to talk fast because I have 9 minutes to make arguments. So the faster I talk, the more arguments I can make. But no one ever wanted to admit, like, look, there's no, like, the finite threshold. We say you can only say so many words a minute, but be fucking reasonable, right? You can't come in and talk like that. No one wanted to be that person, and everyone wants to go, well, I could understand it, I could talk faster, and it makes sense in the speed. Everyone can say, yeah, that's ridiculous. Now do it with arguments. Right. And let me tell you so real quick, I'll just say real quick, this school, Louisville, they were radical black activists. And I remember I was judging a debate once. It was after I was done debating. So then I became a judge, and I judged Louisville versus this other team. And surprisingly, I voted for Louisville, which I almost never did because they refused to engage in the rules of debate. They would not talk about the topic. Instead, it was always just slavery. And so my judge philosophy said, you have to talk about the topic. And if you don't, and the other team calls you out, you lose. This team decided not to call them out. So both sides agreed to talk about a different topic, to talk about slavery. I thought Louisville won. Anyways, their coach comes in because he thought I was going to vote against them. He's a big dude, intimidating guy, and he sits right behind me like he's going to fucking intimidate me. You know, and I vote for him. Then he's pleasantly surprised. And the other team's bitching at me like always happens. And so I'm going, and I'll never forget. It was one of the funniest fucking things I've ever heard. Because this guy sounded identical to Michael Eric Tyson. And he goes, let's talk about isms. And I just started fucking laughing my ass off. Like, here we go. Let's talk about isms. I was like,
oh God, dog. I'm fucking out.
Yeah, I was like, are you shitting me? But no, like this talking fast thing, I'll give you an example. We're just schmucks from this school, Clarion University. My friend, you know, he was a JV level debater, a mid-level debater, and they got tired of losing to the most ridiculous fucking arguments. Like, oh, the top takes corn subsidies, and someone stands in and says, my uncle, you know, was beaten in the Jim Crow South, and you're a white person, so you should pay the price for that and forfeit. They got tired of that shit, right? So what they did was they decided that I had this parrot my dad gave me. It was a stuffed parrot, and when you pushed it, it would say like "fuck you," you know, stuff like that. So their entire debate strategy, this tournament, they were 0-2. It's an 8-round tournament. They switched to this strategy round 3. One of the people didn't talk. The one partner, he just hit. They would ask him a question, he'd hit the parrot, and they'd answer. The other one put a garbage can on his head and started beating it with a wooden spoon, screaming about how Donald Rumsfeld worked for the company that created aspartame, and it was a conspiracy to kill us all with Diet Coke. They won 5 debates in a row. 5 debates in a row they won because all the judges, every judge had a different reason to vote for him. I get it, man. I see how you're attacking like the patriarchy and blah blah blah.
I remember this being like a trend in like the late 2000s.
Yeah, and so at the end of the tournament, they're telling all these judges like, you stupid fucking idiots, there was no point. We're making fun of you, and you're voting for us because you're saying, oh, because as smart as these people are, they don't want to say something like this. I don't understand what the fuck you're doing. This is stupid.
Dude, that's literally the entire thing. Well, also tax fraud and evasion, but that's one of the things. That's the major thing. But the second major thing that is basically propping up modern art in this fucking world is just a bunch of people being like, yes, I get it. It's so deep. And it's like, fucking what is it then? You don't know?
Yeah, I mean, it's... So I did just want to say real quick, I do have to leave in like 10 minutes, but
yeah,
I just thought it'd be...
We're probably going to get out of here too.
Yeah, on the Trump raid.
Let's...
I mean, talking about McCarthyism and stuff, I mean, to me, it's just... I think that one of the unpopular opinions I have is this. You know, when there were no repercussions for the FBI using unverified opposition research to spy on Trump that we know was sourced by a Russian spy, what did you expect was going to happen?
Right.
Of course, you know, in many ways, you know, why I supported Trump was outing the corruption, but the next step of doing something about it never happened. And so you have to ask yourself, I feel like the corruption was like the, you know, boiling frog theory. They're slowly turning up. And now it's like, oh, wait a minute. We could be openly corrupt and no one gives a fuck, or at least the people that matter don't give a fuck. And so now it's, I mean, if you read that warrant today, it basically took every document that he had as president.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I didn't read the whole thing. I just read the excerpt and was like, what the fuck? But I mean, the way that I feel about this is that the biggest problem I see with like the rampant growth of like corruption in the state is twofold. Number one, I think this is just the tendencies of states regardless, because there's nothing that actually maintains the Constitution at all. The Constitution is just a piece of paper. It doesn't exist in the real world. There's no Constitution tree that grows constitutions, right? It's an ideal that people use voting and hope that they have enough confidence in maintaining these checks and balances against the state. And like, as people get dumb and happy and the state grows, the state always grows in power. That's basically the job of the Supreme Court, is to give the state more power. It's supposed to curtail things, but the way that it actually works is that it determines whether or not something's constitutional or unconstitutional. If it says it's not constitutional, it just gets done again later, and eventually gets a rubber stamp of approval from the Supreme Court throughout the years. So the power of the government will always increase, and the onus, you know, and like Milton Friedman said, you know, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government solution.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Or temporary government program. Right. And so I think that's kind of a part A. Part B is that I think that what we have actually is not the government changing so much as we have the philosophy on the left and the right changing so much. And so what has happened is, on the left, Marxism, you know, critical theory, postmodernism, these things have infected as a subversive ideology that they are, the left more and more and more and more and more. It used to be during the civil rights movement, you know, you had like 10% that were crazy radicals and the other 90% were liberals that would negotiate with the crazy radicals to get civil rights done. You know what I mean? And now it's something like 50-50. And what I've seen worse even than that is that the right never was liberal. The right was never modern, you know, Enlightenment values. What the right was pre-modernist Christian. They protected values. And when liberalism came about, they were like, oh, this is a really good system that helps me and my family and my church protect our values. And so long as you don't go after the right on the shit that they really care about, they kind of tend to not give a fuck, which also works pretty well in liberalism. But the problem is that system requires a moral foundation, just like the leftists has a moral foundation, which is Marxism. These are two competing moral philosophies that say this is what is right and wrong in the world. And the right has slowly and surely decayed all of their morality and given it away and chipped it away and become less and less Christian, more and more cafeteria religion Christian, and their moral underpinning towards their ideas was gone 150 years ago, but still getting worse. And this is when William F. Buckley tries to redo things, and he calls the neoconservative movement in his mission statement for the National Review, says that conservatives are people standing by telling them to stop. And it's like, what the fuck is that? That's the most pussy shit ever. It's two steps forward, one step back in the wrong fucking direction, and you're not doing anything. And so as the right loses its philosophy and loses its underpinnings that made it something that held the left back, and the left gets more and more subservient, what you're seeing is the faction of the left pull to the hard left. The faction of the conservatives pull more to the center and also kind of pull away. And then you're seeing a portion of the reactionary right that's like, fuck you, I don't want black people in my neighborhood. And you know what I mean? And then you're also seeing populism. You're seeing these different reactionary forces to the sheer weakness of the right that has been losing for 100 years. And I don't think that's necessarily the state or the FBI or any of those things. I think all of that is a consequence of the fact that we're no longer a liberal society with like mostly liberal lefties and righties kind of like working together.
Yeah, I don't disagree with a lot of that. I think that I would add to it sort of what you were talking about, the levels of wokeness. At the top level of that, I think that they understand and exploit that. Like, I don't think that they necessarily agree with like causes that, like, if you're a progressive, like the World Economic Forum doesn't give a fuck about your values. They don't care at all. They understand that they can exploit those values to enrich themselves. That's it.
They learned it at Wall Street. They learned it at Occupy Wall Street, and they were like, oh, I can inject some fucking dumb wokeness and you won't pay attention to the fact that we just stole fucking hundreds of billions of dollars from you and the economy. All right.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite stories about the George Floyd riots, one of the first days I saw this picture, and it was like a block of a city and like 3 buildings are burnt down, and the only one standing is Chase Bank, and it's got a sign in the window that says Black Lives Matter. Now, Chase Bank has been criminally investigated for predatory lending practices to black people, but that's the one building that they didn't touch. Because
and Wells Fargo.
It says Black Lives Matter. But
well,
no,
Wachovia at the time, but
I think that what you're saying about the morality is absolutely true, because, you know, I think we were talking earlier about the idea of, is it okay to punch a Nazi? There's this old cliche, and I think it stems from what you're talking about, which is, you know, people on the right think people on the left are stupid, and people on the left think people on the right are evil. And it has to do with these people on the left have this moral foundation that they think they are morally correct, and therefore that justifies...
I would argue, for the record, I would argue the opposite is true. People on the right are stupid, and people on the left are evil. That's how I see the world.
Yeah, that's probably right. So what ends up happening? Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Like, I talked to this guy on my show one day. He calls it, sounds like a decent enough guy. He was a gay guy, and he was giving me shit in the chat. So I said, call in, because it's always worse when someone's typing. It's easier to be chippier. If you talk, it tends to be smooth.
Easier not to be like, fuck you.
Right. He wants to talk about the Arizona election audit. Okay, fair enough. So we're talking about it, and I'm like, I don't know. I just think there's questions that need to be answered. But let's say hypothetically X. Hypothetically, there were 50,000, votes from people that lived in the wrong district. Should we count those votes? Hypothetically, they came in 2 weeks late. Should we count those votes? That sort of thing.
Or like hypothetically, they found 55,000 votes that had issues, and the state was won by 11,000 votes. Hypothetically.
Right. So, because what you want to do is get them to say, well, that didn't happen, but hypothetically, if it did, then I would have a problem. Then you could be like, okay, that happened. Right? Like,
right.
Let's go through the facts. But that's the same thing I've been doing with this warrant business. Before the warrant came out, give me your justification, which would justify a raid on a president. And so then when they would say, oh, it's because of nuclear secrets, it's like, okay, let's see what comes out. Because if they're not there, you're going to change your tune and say, no, it was still okay. But anyways, that's getting off what...
Michael Malice has a really good point, and I think you should something to adopt. And when they ask, when he says like, how do you convert people on the left, like family and friends, and he says is go to them and ask them, what is too far? What is a line that like give me your line, right? You don't believe what's going on. You think I'm wrong. Whatever. You think I'm talking about a slippery slope. What is the line that when you say once the left starts doing this, that you'll be like, I'm not with these people, and make them give you that line and then say, okay, I'm going to remember that. And you remember that. Right. And then in a year and a half, come back and remember when you gave me a line that you said this was your line? Well, it's happening now.
I do that all the time. What I do, it's like the whole summer of George Floyd, I was just getting like, so you're saying, right, that if the language of the, just get them to say that this stuff's, I got Destiny to admit that riots are the other side of the coin of voting and that they're legitimate, and that he actually admitted this, he understood that mayors like de Blasio were allowing riots to occur because politically it benefited them because they could blame Trump. He admitted all that. Yep. I got it saved. Now, every time I talk to him and he's like, January 6th, I'm like, fuck you, buddy. Here's what you said about violence, right? Like, so don't get, but anyways, right. This point with this guy, it's like pseudo normal conversation, and then all of a sudden I mentioned the name Trump, and you could feel a physical change in him, like just unabashed anger, like blah, 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 blah. It starts going off about Trump, and I was like, holy shit. And so then I was just like, I asked this, I was like, let me ask you a question. And he's like, Trump's a racist, he supports Nazis, blah, blah, blah. I was like, listen, let me just ask you one question. Let's say you were a poll worker. He lived in Arizona. I was like, let's say you're a poll worker in Arizona, and it's evident to you if Trump wins Arizona, he's going to win the election. He's like, okay. I'm like, it's 1 a.m, and you know that Trump's going to win by 1,000 votes. You willing to cheat? To keep a Nazi out of power? And he's like, I'd have to get back to you. And then he called back in 10 minutes later. He's like, yeah, that would be the moral thing to do. That sums it up. That's how these people think, right? Like, there is no question.
Right. Like, this is the thing. People are like, it's a conspiracy. And I'm like, again, back to that George Carlin quote, because it's so good. You don't need a conspiracy when like interests align. When you weaken the election integrity to such a degree, and then you board up the fucking windows and you send the poll watchers home, and then people come in, I don't know, Detroit, Michigan, where the numbers don't match any of the fucking data, and people come in with fucking ice coolers full of God knows what camera equipment, supposedly, right? And you wonder, like, well, what happened in there? Do you need a conspiracy for that? No, you just need a lack of security and a lack of anybody watching, and then a bunch of woke lefties in there being like, man, fuck this.
Yeah, and I mean, and so what do you think would happen when we were basically had almost the entirety of the media, the entire Democratic Party, most of academia, the tech companies, et cetera, every institution that literally were saying the president of the United States says Nazis are good people, and all of his followers believe that.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think that there are people out there that, because there are people that work themselves up saying, well, this is it. This is the great civil rights movement of our era. We have a Nazi leader that's going to exterminate gay and black people. I have to do something. And that have to do something, the reason we don't see more violence from the left is because they control the institutions. Mm-hmm. If the cultural pendulum swings back and right-wingers start to get control of these institutions, the violence you see will be magnified 10. If you thought the George Floyd riots were bad, wait until you see what happens. Because right now they act with impunity and they assume the grunts on the ground. Okay.
I have an interesting psychological theory. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest it, but I'm pretty good with psych. I mean, I went to grad school for counseling. I'm pretty well read on the research, and I haven't seen anything one way or the other. But I would posit a hypothesis that I think that right wingers because of conscientiousness and hierarchical structure in their personality domain, their lower rates of neuroticism, which is also true, and their individualist philosophies. I would say that one of the big reasons we don't see a lot of riots and things like that is I think the left is more susceptible to mob psychology, which is to say, like, I think when one person blows up something or throws something or like starts some violence, that left wingers in general are more likely to go with the crowd and do that. And right wingers are more likely to be like, wait, what the fuck are people doing? Like, why are we, you know what I mean? Like, and not because they're like superior, but just because of like personality differences.
Yeah, and like that's sort of one of the ironies about January 6th,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I'm not saying, like, if you engage in violence, you engage in violence, right? Don't get me wrong. But there are questions, I won't get into it now, but my take on it is that the Democrats set up the House of Cards, didn't want security there, and there were FBI informants encouraging it. But there were people that engaged in violence.
It's not even, look, you're talking to the most anti-government person on Twitch, okay? It's not that much of a conspiracy theory to go, okay, so the guy who orchestrated the fake Governor Whitmer kidnapping plot gets moved to DC before that, and in the criminal investigations, there's 13 people that are unnamed that are also not prosecuted, and you want me to believe that there were no Fed boys there? Get the fuck out of here.
Right.
That's more absurd than what I'm proposing, which is Fed boys were there. If you tell me Fed boys weren't there, I mean, like, bitch, Occam's razor just proves that like the more likely scenario is Fed boys were there to start some shit because they were already infiltrated with the Oath Keepers and the 3%ers anyways, and we have proof of that too.
Right. So I totally agree with that. But what I was going to say is, like, one of the things that people don't talk about, and again, this isn't to excuse an individual that maybe committed violence, but did you see on the video how many people, even during the riot, were saying, stop it? What the fuck are you doing? Or when Ray Epps the day before was like, we're going into the Capitol, and everyone was like, Fed, no. Like, you don't see that shit at the left-wing riots. You don't see large swaths of people saying, stop, don't do that. Like, it's all, like, the people that would say stop, I saw that. I saw out of Dodge.
No, I saw, no. I disagree. I think a lot of BLM protests, there were a ton of people that were like, you're destroying our community. You're like, stop. What are you doing?
I put that in a different category, but you're right. That's kind of the difference between BLM and Antifa. Like, I say this all the time. Let me get this straight. I'm racist because I'm criticizing a movement that's rioting in predominantly black neighborhoods that at least half the people doing the rioting are white people from outside the neighborhood. Yeah. So if I have a problem with white people going into the inner city black areas and burning their property down, that makes me the racist?
You know how they stopped the riot? You know how they stopped the riots in Richmond, Virginia, where I live? Because the riots wouldn't stop in Richmond, Virginia, because they were all coalescing around Monument Avenue, because that is the first and the original Robert E. Lee statue in America in the capital of the Confederacy, and was also owned by the state, but the state had signed a contract saying that they would never get rid of it, and they violated that contract regardless just to get rid of it, and it had to go to the state appellate courts. So like they couldn't just get rid of that statue, right? They did, of course, which I think is a sad day historically speaking, because what they should have done is just done a fucking statue right down the street of Brown v. Board of Education from Virginia that was tried in Virginia, and added more historical context about where we've come from and what we've done, instead of just crying racism because you fuckers don't understand the Civil War. That being said, they couldn't stop the riots. It was like they were burning down businesses. They kept doing shit. My mom had like assault weapons pointed at her. Like she doesn't know what type of fucking rifles they were, other than that they were scary rifles. It's the only reason I'm using assault weapons instead of the fucking make or whatever it was. And like people were telling her, "You're fucking white. Get out of our neighborhood, bitch," and like shit, like all kinds of. She had to come live with us for a while. It was really bad. And then the state came in, and what they started doing is they put up temporary no parking signs everywhere and started towing people's cars. And they would do it in the middle of the night. They'd put up no parking signs and then tow them at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then people would go out rioting and they'd come back and their car would be towed, and they'd have to go individually and pay to get their car back, right? The funny thing is that completely got rid of all of the riots. And the reason is because the overwhelming majority of people that were here to riot didn't fucking live here. It was a bunch of fucking white college kids that weren't fucking, I mean, like some of them were for VCU in the city, but most of them were out of fucking towners coming in, and all they had to do was tow their fucking cars, which just proved that like nobody that was there was like from our city rioting. It was just a bunch of fucking people from all around the area driving in to fucking riot.
Yeah, and I'll say I totally agree. And just to say this, like, last thing, the point that I have, when I'm arguing with left-wingers that are sort of cheering for the raid of Trump and cheering for the FICE warrants on Trump and cheering for allowing Hillary to delete subpoenaed evidence, et cetera, right? One of the things they don't, and I think this separates me from a lot of people in my audience, I was never a big lock her up person, right? Do I think Hillary Clinton probably deserves to face criminal charges and at least have a day in court? Yeah, particularly deleting subpoenaed evidence, lies and stuff like that. But, and maybe you would say, but she did this heinous, Vince Foster or, her foundation. Yeah, that shit's different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the shit that the email server, the server, and all that shit. To me, the villain in this story isn't Hillary Clinton. It's the fucking bureaucratic state. It's the FBI, right? And like, think about it. Like, what's the?
I mean, they're both. They're both. I mean, real quick. I just want to say, I think both her and Trump belong in prison. Like, fuck all of them.
I don't give a fuck, and that's the ultimate point I'm getting to. This is what people don't understand. Like,
Five Eyes, you mean? Yes, facts. Dark conspiracy.
Yeah. I'll point out the double standard, and I'll say this is the problem, the double standard of the bureaucratic state. And if we have bureaucrats that are unelected, that are picking and choosing winners politically, that's basically the only issue that matters, because regardless of who wins by strength of argument or convincing the opponents or the independents of what policy should be instituted, if bureaucrats are making the decision, then it doesn't matter anyways. You better hope they agree with you. So what I tell people is one of the most frustrating things when I particularly am arguing with the left, and I'm like, look at this double standard. Like, they raided Trump for mishandling classified information, which we know Hillary did, and they'll say,
right,
but it wasn't marked as classified at the time. Yes, it was. James Comey admitted 112 emails coming from 51 different email chains were classified at the time, including 8 chains that were.
But they didn't recommend prosecution. Okay.
Well, right.
I don't know why the FBI would care about that, but they did, okay? And so they must have cared deeply because it was a very special case, Rob Noerr.
That's right. So, but they did have this evidence, right? It was classified at the time. And not only that, it's worse because she then went on to delete subpoenaed evidence. And we all know if they would have subpoenaed Trump and Trump would have said, oh shit, my bad, we accidentally destroyed all that evidence. You think that would have been acceptable? Oh, the FBI would have been like, oh, no need for a raid then.
Yeah, right.
You destroyed it. No problem. No problem.
Oh, my bad. Sorry, I paid a corporation to destroy it on accident.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. So when I say this to the left, you know what they always, at the end, 90% of them default to? They'll say, that's okay, lock her up too. And I'm like, you're missing the fucking point. More than any damage that one particular president or candidate for president or State Department person can do, particularly when you're talking about the crime of mishandling classified information, more than anything they could do is the problem is the system itself being corrupt. Hillary Clinton will be dead and Donald Trump will be dead, and hell, me and you will be dead. And the way things are going, the bureaucratic state will grow and grow and grow. And
all I gotta say is that
with all of us gone.
Because we were supposed to end this like an hour ago. So,
yeah,
and I love it. I love the passion. I love that we're two talkers and we can talk into the wee small hours in the morning. But I'll simply say this. Every politician that didn't actively try and get Julian Assange and Eric Snowden pardoned and didn't make or take steps to do that can go fuck themselves and go under the prison. We could talk about war crimes. We can talk about fraud. We can talk about all the other evil shit that they did. But just as a nice little extra litmus test, if you didn't try and get Snowden and you didn't try and get Assange into America and pardoned, go fuck yourself. You're a fucking piece of shit. You're nothing but an evil fucking status that just supports the bureaucracy. And that goes for Trump, and that goes for Hillary, and that goes for about 99% of the people working in the government.
Well, and that's and I'll just finish saying that that's the real truth that Trump supporters, which I was one, I volunteered for Trump's campaign. I still support Trump. But the truth that they don't want to admit is he bitched out. He could have pardoned Assange. He could have pardoned Snowden, right? He didn't do it because he put bad people around him, right, that were doing everything they could to make sure that they protected themselves and the state, the bureaucratic state. And so now, sorry, man, you're reaping the fucking the results of that decision. You are, man. Like, what did you think was going to happen when you let these people that had knives out for you for 4 years get off with impunity? What did you think was going to happen? And so I feel bad, but you know who else I feel bad for? The people languishing in prison January 6th that didn't do shit, that were nonviolent. No one gives a fuck about them that are in solitary.
Some of these people are in solitary confinement for like 13 months.
Right. I wonder if that person that was concerned that McCarthy had someone kill themselves gives a shit about the January 6 people that have killed themselves. You think for a moment he thought, oh, geez, if I'm going to levy that sort of criticism, of course not.
Well,
I'll leave it go there.
This is the problem between, deontologists and libertarians that follow natural law. We have hard lines and we say, This is right and this is wrong. Well, we don't really say this is right so much. We simply say anything but this is wrong. It's a word thing. I'm not going to get into it, right? And the left says, what are the outcomes? What? Let's do a consequentialist analysis about what the outcomes will be. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had a crystal fucking ball to understand the butterfly effect, the outcomes of every fucking decision you make. The fact of the matter is, it's whatever outcomes they choose to believe will happen and whatever data they want to put in.
Right. And if you run the experiment randomly thousands of times, even if it's true that in the odd time that you could have benefit to the majority of people violating rights or doing something shitty that way, the truth is, if over amount of time, you guarantee a disaster if you embrace that sort of, and that's what they don't understand. And real quick, also the same with the, election interference or, the election not being secure. Even if you could argue, no, it didn't happen this time, the system is set up that it could happen, which means it will happen.
Rob Noerr,
it's inevitable.
Well, I hope you have a great night. Obviously that's why we need voter ID laws and we need to pass the the Voting Rights Act. Obviously, I know I'm happy to hear that you're such a big supporter of the Voting Rights Act. Rob Noerr for Congress 2024. Let's go. It was a pleasure. Hooroo. No, you just brought up fucking Black Hitler. Yo. Oh, I love Gazi Kodo, man.
Yeah.
Kwabe,
Hey, white Jesus, I'll do it.
Okay, white Jesus, I'll do it. Fucking, oh God. Why is he not making like tons of content and famous? Because that was amazing. But it was a pleasure having you. Anytime you want to come, you want to chat or do anything, I appreciate it.
There's something coming up with the Crucible. I know behind the scenes some of that stuff. Once sort of things start to kick off in other ways, like I'm getting my radio show back and stuff like that. So I'll reach out to you. I think you'd enjoy coming on talking to some Pennsylvania voters about some issues. It's not like I have a big audience on the radio, but I have probably 100, 200 people that listen on the radio, mostly old timers. So I think
I'll talk to some boomers. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Mark, he didn't hear you, but he said actual voters.
That's good.
All right, brother.
Guys, thank both of you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate
Pleasure
it.
to meet you.
You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.